Welcome to Creepy Vibes, where the roads are long, the nights are darker than they should be, and every turn might lead you somewhere you were never meant to go. In this episode, we're diving into 20 true scary roadside encounters in Texas. Real stories pulled from the eerie highways, forgotten dirt roads, and haunted backroads of the Lone Star State. From glowing figures walking along FM roads at midnight to 18-wheelers that vanish without a trace, these tales will make you think twice before pulling over. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake: they leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror waiting in the darkness is far from over. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started and the horror is ready to unfold. Now buckle up, let's hit the road. And head straight into the unknown. They say if you're headed west on Route 45, out past the last gas station in Breckland County, and you keep going past the old cattle overpass where the land gets flat and quiet as a funeral, you'll eventually reach mile marker 303. Most folks pass it without a second thought. It's just a white metal post, half bent from a truck that clipped it years back, planted near the ditch like a gravestone no one visits. But the truckers? The ones who drive late and don't ask too many questions, they talk. They tell stories on the CB, most with a chuckle and a cigarette hanging from their lips. But if you listen closely, if you hear the pauses between the laughter, you'll realize not all of them are joking. My name's Ernie Barnes. I've been driving long haul since '89, seen fog like concrete, coyotes big as wolves, and once hit something I never did find in the mirror afterward. But nothing stuck with me like what I saw one night in the spring of 2011. It was just after 3 a.m. I remember because the digital clock on my dash had just flicked over from 3:06, and I'd been watching it, fighting the kind of road hypnosis that sets in when it's been dark too long and the white lines start to blur. I hadn't seen another pair of headlights in over an hour. Just me, the hum of the wheels, and the occasional chirp of the CB crackling to life with some trucker's static-filled ramble from 3 states over. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was a deer or maybe a broken-down car. But no. Standing dead still on the shoulder, just at the edge of my high beams, was a man. Thin, tall, wearing what looked like a windbreaker, the hood down, and jeans dark enough they disappeared into the night. He had one arm raised in a wave, casual, like he was just saying hi from the porch, except he had no hand. The arm ended just below the wrist. Nothing but sleeve and air. Now, I've picked up hitchhikers before. You get a feel for who's trouble, and who's just a drifter trying to get somewhere warm. But something about this guy, something was wrong in a way I couldn't put into words. His posture was off, too still, like he'd been standing that way for a long time. I slowed down anyway, not because I wanted to. I think something in me did it without asking. I rolled past him real slow, maybe 10 miles an hour, eyes flicking from mirror to mirror. He didn't move, just watched me, his face hidden in the shadows, but I swear I felt his eyes. They followed me like heat. I kept going, didn't stop. Not that night. The next morning, I pulled into the lot behind Pete's Diner in Archer Hill, still rattled. Asked around. An older guy, Larry something, who'd been hauling cattle out of San Angelo, raised an eyebrow when I mentioned the mile marker. 303, he said, chewing on a toothpick. You saw him? I nodded. You didn't stop, did you? I told him no. He leaned forward across the table. Good. You don't stop for that one. You don't even look if you can help it. Truckers used to call him Stumpy Pete, like it was some joke, but it ain't funny. Not anymore. I asked what he meant, and Larry's smile faded. He waves. Every night. Always at 3:07. Always with that stump. Some say he was a drifter who got clipped by a semi and bled out in the ditch. Others say he's looking for the guy who left him there, like maybe he still don't know he's dead. Either way, you stop for him. You don't make it to the next town. Not the same, anyhow. I didn't believe him, not fully, not yet. But that story got under my skin. I started paying attention. And over the next 6 months, I heard variations of the same tale from at least 8 other drivers. Some claimed they saw him once and never again. Others said he showed up in their dreams. After. One guy, Jay, out of Lubbock, he went white when I brought it up and said nothing, but I picked him up once. He sat real quiet until I passed marker 306. Then he smiled. Just smiled. I never saw teeth like that on a man before. I didn't ask what happened next. Jay wouldn't have answered anyway. Years passed. I switched companies. Started driving more local runs to stay near home. And for a while I forgot about mile marker 303, until last December. My nephew Danny had started trucking. Young, eager, full of dumb confidence. I told him the usual stuff: check your oil, don't trust the weather app, always carry cash. And, half as a joke, I told him about the man at 303. He laughed. Uncle Ernie, that's just road myth crap. Like the vanishing hitchhiker or the phantom lights in Marfa. He left for a solo overnight run from Denton to Fort Stockton that weekend. Didn't make it. Cops said he must have fallen asleep at the wheel. The cab veered off the road near, you guessed it, mile marker 303. Truck jackknifed in the ditch. No skid marks. No signs he even tried to brake. They said his face was, I can't even say it out loud. My sister still hasn't looked at the autopsy report. But I did. His expression looked like he was smiling. A wide, unnatural grin, stretched tight, almost like it was forced. They said maybe a seizure or some kind of rigor mortis oddity. But I knew. Deep down I knew. You can believe what you want. Call it fatigue, a trick of the lights, a collective hallucination passed down through diesel fumes and loneliness. But me? I stay clear of that stretch now. Won't drive past it, not even in daylight, because he's still out there, waving, smiling, waiting for someone to pull over and ask, need help? But he doesn't, he never does, and the ones who stop, they don't wave back. They say it just popped up one night like a boil on the back of a place that didn't ask for it. Gas station 17 wasn't there Monday, but by Tuesday morning, folks driving the late stretch of Loop 1604 near Elmendorf started spotting it. Not many paid it any mind. There's enough rusted-out, half-dead stations along that road to ignore one more ghost of a business. But this one had lights flickering, humming fluorescent ones that seemed too clean for such a ragged place. There was no sign announcing it, just the bold white numbers painted over the rusted corrugated roof. 17. That's all. Just 17. I didn't hear about it until a few weeks after my cousin Trey disappeared. He was a drifter, not the type to keep a calendar or check in regular. But he always came home for his mama's birthday, never missed it in 17 years. When he didn't show last October, she knew something was off. I didn't think much of it until I talked to Nolan, a trucker friend who ran that stretch from San Antonio to Floresville every few days. He asked if I'd ever seen the new one. I said, "What new one?" And that's when he mentioned gas station 17. He said it looked open but wasn't. Had a clean awning but cracked pavement. One pump. Always just one. And no clerk. Never saw one. He went in once. Doors slid open like they'd been expecting him. Shelves lined with dusty cans, soda machines humming, and a single bathroom key dangling on a rusted chain. But no register. No bell, no greeting. He grabbed a bottle of water, walked back out, and left cash on the counter. Said he felt eyes on his back the whole time. Then he mentioned something else quiet, like he was scared just saying it. Said he saw Trey's truck. Beat-up red Chevy with a dented side panel from the deer he hit back in '08, parked at the side of the station. He even peeked through the window, saw a backpack in the passenger seat with Trey's old Dallas Cowboys patch sewn into it. That's what did it for me. I didn't waste time calling cops. I knew they wouldn't give a damn about a grown man going missing for a few weeks, not around here. I packed a flashlight, a tire iron, and Trey's photo in my glove box, and I headed out one foggy night. Just after midnight. Loop 1604 was a snake through empty woods and broken farmland. You could drive for 20 minutes and not see a single porch light. I passed the same busted billboard twice before the fog lifted just enough for the lights to shine through. There it was. Gas station 17. It didn't look old, but it didn't look new either. The concrete was cracked like time had. Split it open, weeds sprouting from beneath, but the glass door gleamed like it had been wiped just hours ago. One pump, standing under a humming light that flickered once every few seconds, and it was dripping. I thought it was water at first, but the color wasn't right. Too dark, too thick. I parked beside the station, got out, and walked toward the pump. Each drip hit the stained concrete with a soft, wet slap. When I leaned in, I caught the smell coppery, sharp, unmistakable. Blood. I stepped back, looked around, tried to find some camera, some prank setup, but there wasn't a soul in sight. No cars, no animals, not even a cricket chirping. I walked up to the glass door. It opened for me before I touched it. Inside, it was cold, unnaturally cold. Shelves were full, but the labels looked off. Faded brands I didn't recognize sodas. Named things like Dr. Quiver and Fizzlight and snack bags, filled with things that looked like dried mushrooms or maybe jerky, but not beef. Not anything I could identify. Then I saw the register. It wasn't there. Just an empty space where it should have been. But next to it was a Polaroid photo tacked to the counter with a knife. Trey. He was standing right outside the station, smiling like it was just another day. But something about the picture was wrong. His eyes were wide, too wide, pupils blown out so much the whites barely showed. His mouth was curled into a grin that looked too forced, like someone had pulled the corners with fishing line. I reached for the photo, but the lights blinked out, total darkness. The hum stopped. The cold deepened. And then I heard it. Wet footsteps, not from outside. Behind me, inside. I spun around with my flashlight, but it wouldn't flick on. I shook it, slapped it, and finally, it lit up. Nothing there. I scanned the aisles. Nothing. But the sound was still there, closer now. Then the dripping started again. Not outside. Inside. Behind the counter. I walked slowly, every part of me screaming to turn and run, but I had to see. Had to know. I leaned over the counter. A puddle. Deep red. Thick. Something moved in it. A hand. Just the hand, twitching like it was searching for something. It was missing 3 fingers. I stumbled back, knocking over a display of chip bags that crunched like dry leaves. The lights flickered again, and Trey was there. Standing in the doorway, but not Trey. Not anymore. He was pale. Skin pulled tight like wax left too long in the sun. His eyes were still too wide. His lips curled too high, showing too many teeth. Raised his arm, the one missing fingers, and pointed at me. "You're late," he said. The voice was all wrong. Too deep, too slow. Like something mimicking human speech without understanding it. Then, behind him, I saw them. More figures. All pale, all wrong, all grinning. I ran, bolted past him through the open doors. The night air hit me like a slap, and I didn't stop to look back. My truck wouldn't start. Of course it wouldn't, so I ran. Down loop 1604, gravel tearing at my boots, lungs burning. The lights from gas station 17 didn't fade, they followed. And then, nothing. I woke up in my own bed the next morning. Truck parked outside. Tires caked in dried mud. Trey's photo on my nightstand. Same photo. Only this time I was standing next to him, smiling too wide. And now, every night at 2:17 a.m., I hear a soft drip from outside. I don't go look anymore, because last time I did, pump number 2 had appeared, and it was waiting for me. There's a lonely stretch of I-10 westbound past Kerrville where the landscape flattens out, and the cedar trees thin to brittle brush, the kind that crackles even when there's no wind. Out there, where the horizon stretches like a taut wire, and the sun seems to hesitate before dropping behind the hills, sits a weather-worn rest stop. It's not one of those big, well-lit ones with vending machines and security cameras and families snapping selfies by the state map. No, this one is older, almost forgotten. One of those places that the Department of Transportation probably meant to decommission years ago, but never got around to, where the asphalt parking lot is faded and pitted with weeds, and the bathroom. Building stands like a concrete tomb with a rusted roof and half the lights dead. It was a place I never would have stopped if I hadn't needed to so badly. I'd been driving from Houston to El Paso, trying to clear my head after my divorce finalized. No one knows loneliness like a man chewing sunflower seeds with no destination, except a cheap motel and no voice in the car except the static of AM radio. Somewhere around 11:40 that night, the caffeine wore off and my bladder decided to riot. I passed a green highway sign that simply read, "Rest Area 1 mile." It felt like a blessing, the kind of mundane miracle you don't question. Pulled in and parked under the single working light, the one buzzing like it was half drunk. My headlights swept over the building as I turned the engine off. The structure had 2 doors marked men and women in faded blue paint, each inset into thick concrete walls. There was a payphone mounted to the wall that looked like it hadn't seen a quarter since the 90s. It was dead silent except for the insects and the high-pitched whine of electrical things too small to see. I left the car running just in case, don't ask why, just instinct. The night air hit me as dry and heavy, like stepping into a room where someone had just been yelling. Everything felt used. Inside the men's room it smelled like old bleach. And something sweeter, something unpleasant beneath it, like rotting fruit or wet hair. There were 2 urinals and a single stall. The sink was cracked porcelain, the soap dispenser empty. A mirror hung crookedly over the sink, the edges browned and curling from years of moisture and neglect. I was about to do my business and get out when something about the mirror caught my attention. At first, I thought it was just the way the overhead light flickered. My reflection shimmered like a heat mirage. But as I moved closer, I realized it wasn't me looking back. Not exactly. My face was there, but wrong. My eyes in the reflection were too wide, too alert. My mouth was just slightly open, but I hadn't opened it. And as I stood there, frozen, the reflection tilted its head just a little to the left while I hadn't moved at all. I jerked back like I'd touched something hot. My heart thudded up into my throat, and I felt a cold sweat bloom on my neck. I turned to see if someone had come in behind me, some prankster or drugged-out hitchhiker. Nothing, just the empty stink of tile and mildew. Then the lights flickered, hard this time, like a warning. I looked back at the mirror. My reflection smiled. I didn't. It wasn't a wide grin, just a small tug at the corners of the mouth, something subtle and deeply wrong. The kind of smile someone might give if they were watching you undress without you knowing. My hands trembled, and I looked down at them, needing to reassure myself they were still mine. But in the mirror, my hands were still. Then, slowly, the reflection reached up and pressed its fingertips to its face right under the eyes. It began to push inward, deforming its own face with deliberate pressure. Its skin creased and folded like soft clay. I watched, horrified, as it pressed so hard the skin broke, revealing something darker underneath, something like ash or meat or both. But I didn't feel it. I didn't move. I just watched myself be destroyed. I turned and ran. Not out of the building, not yet. I stumbled back and slammed into the stall door, hard hammering like I'd sprinted a mile. I looked down at my body, touched my own face intact. Nothing bleeding, nothing pressed in. But in the mirror, oh God. In the mirror, my doppelganger had peeled the skin beneath its eyes wide open, revealing not sockets or eyeballs, but more fingers reaching out, twitching. They wriggled like worms in a nest. I heard a wet sound like slugs falling on tile. I looked behind me again. Still nothing there. But I knew, in my bones, that something else was in the room with me. And worse, it knew I was watching. I bolted out of the restroom into the sickly yellow light outside. My breath clouded the air like it was suddenly winter, but the night was warm. I jumped into my car, slammed the door, and locked it. I looked into the rearview mirror to check the back seat and stopped breathing. The figure was sitting right behind me, not in the seat. In the mirror, it looked like me, but older or deader. Like someone had taken a photo of me, left it in a flooded basement for 10 years, and then animated it just enough to make it blink. Its skin hung wrong, its eyes didn't track. And it didn't move, not until I looked away. When I glanced at the back seat directly, there was nothing there. But in the mirror, it leaned forward. I gunned the engine. Gravel spat from under my tires as I peeled out of the rest area. I didn't slow down until I hit the city limits of Fort Stockton, headlights trembling over the blacktop. I found a gas station with a convenience store parked right under the awning, and stumbled out like a man who'd just been chased. Inside, I avoided the bathroom, bought coffee, sat down at one of those bolted-down plastic tables and just stared. Eventually, I worked up the courage to go back out and check the car again. Nothing. No sign of the thing. But from that night on, every time I catch my reflection window, screen, rear view, even a spoon, I look a little longer than I should. I study my face, waiting to see if something will twitch when it shouldn't. And sometimes it does. My girlfriend told me she caught me smiling in my sleep last week. Said it wasn't the sweet kind either. Said it looked like I was enjoying something awful. She's been sleeping on the couch since. I don't blame her. Because here's the part that's got me questioning reality. That rest stop isn't on the map anymore. I checked. Drove that stretch again in daylight. Nothing there. Just an unbroken line of fence posts and pale grass. No parking lot, no bathrooms. Not even a turnout, but I still dream about it. Not the place itself, just the mirror. Just the thing in it. And every time I do, I wake up with a smear of blood under my eyes, like something's been digging around while I slept, or worse, teaching me how. GPS said to take the next exit. Said it plain as day, turn right onto Elm County exit 19. I was driving alone, as I usually did when I took these long, pointless detours across Texas backroads. They gave me something to do since the divorce. Quiet lanes, gas stations with broken signage, little diners where the waitress might still call you hon. It calmed the noise inside my skull. So when the screen on my dash lit up and that voice told me to turn, I didn't question it. It was just after sunset, That hour when the world slips into a gray, uncertain hush. The highway behind me stretched on like a black ribbon, and ahead was nothing but a long, winding roll of pine. Trees and falling shadows. I slowed down when I saw the sign. It was faded. Real faded. The metal was rust-bitten and half buried in the brush, but it was there, Elm County Exit 19, bent just a little like it had been smacked by something heavy a long time ago. I hadn't seen another car in at least 20 minutes. My gas was at half a tank, no bars on my phone. The decision wasn't hard. I turned. The road that met me was narrow and old. Not gravel, no. This was cracked asphalt, the kind that had once seen paint and maintenance but had been long forgotten. Weeds crawled through the cracks and patches of forest leaned over like they were listening to me pass. I didn't know where it led. GPS showed a vague line that twisted out into nothing, no town names, just a trail into the green. But I kept on, maybe out of boredom, maybe because part of me wanted to believe there were still places left that weren't listed. On every map, every blog, every Yelp page. 5 minutes in, I noticed the silence. You'd expect bugs, crickets, maybe the chirp of frogs or the whine of mosquitoes. But there was nothing. Just the tires humming against the busted pavement and the engine's low growl. I turned the radio on static. I hit scan more static. I pulled the GPS up again. The screen had frozen. The little blue arrow that was supposed to be me was stuck, just hovering on the edge of a green void. Something about that made my hands cold. Not panic, not yet, just the beginnings of unease. I told myself the signal was bad. That happened out here. But I didn't like how the trees had crept closer, how they leaned in like they wanted to block the road behind me. I glanced in the rear view. No cars. No light. Just the darkness pooling behind me like oil. Then I saw the first mailbox. It was rusted to hell, leaning sideways, no flag, no number. Just nailed to a splintering post that was wrapped in barbed wire like someone had tried to keep something out or in. I slowed down and looked past it, but all I saw was forest. The kind of forest that doesn't want to be walked through. I kept going. Then came the second mailbox. This one was identical to the first, except it had a strip of black tape across the front. No number again. No house in sight. I started to feel like I was on a loop. I passed a third. Then a fourth. Every time I'd swear it was different, something small, a dent here, a broken hinge there, but it was always the same feeling, that crawling sensation under my skin, like I was being measured. Watch. I tapped the brakes. My headlights caught. Something up ahead, something low to the ground, crawling fast across the road. I stopped completely. It had been too quick to make out clearly. Just a shape. Maybe a coyote. Maybe not. I reached for my phone. Still no bars. Still stuck GPS. The little blue arrow hadn't moved at all. That's when I remembered what that guy at the gas station had said, hours earlier, just outside of San Marcos. I'd asked him if there was anything interesting to see down the back roads. Near Elm County. He'd looked at me with a strange expression, like I just said a slur without knowing it. Ain't no Elm County anymore, he'd said. Fire took it. Back in '72, 4 kids went joyriding and the whole road caught. Never found the bodies. Some say the road still shows up. GPS glitch or something. But you do well to keep. On the main line, I'd laughed then. Laughed it off like everyone does when an old-timer tells a story too far-fetched to be true. But now, with the GPS dead and my headlights carving through trees that seemed to bend toward the hood of my car, I wasn't laughing. I eased the car forward. The road curved hard left. Just past the bend was something that froze my lungs, a nongs. Old pickup truck. Burnt out, half the frame eaten away. Tires melted flat. And yet, there it sat, parked perfectly at the edge of the road, as if it had only recently pulled over. I stopped. The license plate was blackened, unreadable. The windows were shattered. Inside, I could swear I saw something a shape, hunched, unmoving, in the driver's seat. I rolled my window down halfway, called out. No answer. Something about that shape, that posture, it didn't look like someone sleeping. It looked like someone waiting. I didn't stay. The road narrowed further. The brush scraped the sides of my car now, and the forest changed. I didn't notice it at first, but the trees had thinned out. Not because there were fewer of them, but because they were black, charred, burned. Every single one of them. Black bark, ashen leaves, scorched trunks like skeletal arms reaching out. The air smelled of old fire and something sour beneath it, like wet meat left too long in the sun. And then the sky disappeared. Not the sun, not a storm, just the sky. 1 minute it was dusk above me, the next it was dark. No stars, no moon, just blackness overhead like someone had draped a blanket over the world. My headlights flickered, once, twice, then held steady. Ahead, something stood in the road. I slammed the brakes. It was a person. A kid, no older than 16, shirtless, skin pale and blistered like he'd been cooked, eyes black, lips curled into something between a grin and a grimace. His hair was gone, burned away. He lifted one hand. It was missing 3 fingers. I reversed, tires shrieking. My chest pounded. The kid didn't move. He just watched as I backed up around the curve, the trees now creaking as if alive, groaning and rustling even though there was no wind. I turned the wheel, aimed the car back the way I came, but the road, it wasn't there. It should have been. I just turned left coming in, but now the road behind me was gone. Nothing but blackened forest and a solid wall of trees. No path, no curve, no mailbox. Just ash and bark and silence. I turned back to the front. The kid was gone, but something new was there. A sign, propped up against a charred stump. Painted in red, handwritten, shaky. You can't leave. I floored it. I don't know why. There was nowhere to go, but I had to try. The road ahead wound tighter and tighter. The trees now so close I swore I saw faces in the bark. Screaming, melting. Shadows crawled across the ground like oil slicks, writhing without source. And then I saw them. 4 figures standing in the middle of the road. Teenagers. One with a varsity jacket, sleeves burned down to the elbows. One with a prom dress in tatters. One holding a melted record player. And the last, he looked right at me, the boy from before. He opened his mouth, and I heard the sound of fire roaring, cracking, tearing through dry wood and flesh. I braked hard. The engine died. They walked forward. I tried to start the car again. Nothing. They came closer. I locked the doors. Like that would help. The boy reached the hood, pressed his hand, what was left of it, against the glass, and it burned. My windshield. Hissed, bubbled, blackened under his touch. I screamed. Then nothing. I woke up hours later, or maybe minutes. I don't know. The car was parked on the shoulder of the highway. No exit. No road. Just the long stretch of blacktop behind me and miles of nothing ahead. The GPS still said, turn right onto Elm County exit 19. Only it wasn't there. Tried to drive. The car started fine. No sign of damage. No proof of anything. Just a smell in the air smoke. Faint, like the last breath of a dying fire. I got back to San Marcos and stopped at that gas station again. Told the old man what happened. He didn't look surprised. Shouldn't have turned, he said. Why's it still on GPS? I asked. He shrugged. That ain't GPS, son. That's memory. That road burned into the land, into time. Still wants riders. Still hungry. I haven't driven since. I take buses now. Stay off back roads. But sometimes, just before I fall asleep, I hear the voice again in my head. Calm, mechanical. Turn right onto Elm, County Exit 19. And sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't made it out, if I'd stayed, if maybe I didn't leave. Not really. Maybe I'm still on that road, still turning, still burning. They call it Dead Dog Lane for a reason. It's a rutted back road east of Jefferson, Texas, barely wide enough for 2 tires to track straight through the weeds. No one paves it. No one claims it. It shows up on no county maintenance records. And yet, everybody in Marion County knows where it is, especially the ones who never talk about it. The name comes from a string of incidents that started sometime in the late 60s, when someone or something began leaving dead strays along the gravel. Always skinned. Always placed belly up with their mouths sewn shut with black thread. Old-timers say they stopped counting at 13, but that's not why people stay away now. The dogs were just the opening act. The real fear came later when a call came through dispatch one August night in 2007. 2 teenagers, Marla and Trenton Sims, called 911 in a panic from somewhere off that stretch. Said they saw blue lights in their rearview mirror, thought it was a cop, but the lights didn't behave like any patrol car they'd ever seen. No siren, just that slow pulse of blue on, off on without ever revealing what it was attached. To that they pulled over. The lights stopped behind them, bathing their back window in cobalt. Then nothing. No footsteps. No engine. Just static buzzing on their radio, and the crackle of something moving just outside the glow. That's when the screaming started on the line. Marla's voice shrieked into the phone. "It's in the lights. It's in the goddamn lights." Then, silence. Jefferson PD sent a unit. Then another. Both vanished off dispatch within the same stretch of gravel. No radio calls. No cell pings. No tire tracks leading away. Just 2 cruisers found days later, still running, with both driver's side doors wide open and red-blue flashers bleeding into the dawn. The officers, Gentry and Alvarez, were never found. Not a scrap of clothing. Not a speck of blood. Just teeth marks. In the leather of one headrest and a badge snapped clean in half, lying in the ditch beside a freshly skinned coyote. After that, the sheriff's office declared Dead Dog Lane off limits. They won't officially say it doesn't exist, but if you try to report anything from that road today, you'll get redirected, hung up on, or worse told it was already investigated. Case closed. Even if you're screaming into the phone. Even if the blue lights are already outside your windshield, I didn't believe it either. Not until my brother disappeared last fall. Wade was a tow truck driver, always taking the long routes, always looking for weird, backwater shortcuts to shave off time. I warned him plenty. We grew up in Jefferson. We'd heard the stories in school like everyone else, but Wade didn't scare easy. He said most legends were built on backfiring engines and bored teenagers. Then came the night dispatch logged his final pickup from a broken-down Dodge Caravan on Dead Dog Lane. He never made it back. I know what you're thinking. You're probably saying, why the hell would anyone go there after all that? I've asked myself that 100 times. But grief messes with you. It makes you reckless. Makes you want to believe you can fix things just by showing up. I waited until close to midnight on the anniversary of Wade's last call. Figured if this place operated on any kind of pattern, that night would be it. I didn't take a weapon. Didn't bring backup. Just a flask, a voice recorder, and a dying curiosity I couldn't shake. The entrance to Dead Dog Lane doesn't have a sign. Just 2 leaning pines and a rusted barbed wire fence someone once half-assed and abandoned. When I crossed it, my cell dropped signal immediately. I mean instantly. 1 second I had full bars, the next nothing. The temperature dropped too. Like I'd driven into a cold pocket underground. About a quarter mile in, the gravel shifted from gray to reddish black. The trees bent lower. Not windblown, bent, like something big had. Walked through here for years and pressed the canopy into a slouch. Then I saw the first set of eyes. Not animal eyes. Not glowing like deer or coyotes. These were human. Just a single pair in the trees, reflecting light in a way that didn't blink. I stopped the car, cut the engine, sat there with my window halfway down, breath clouding in the air even though it was September in Texas. The eyes vanished. Then the blue started. At first, I thought it was another car behind me. Reflex made me glance in the rear view, but the road was empty. Still, the light kept pulsing. No source, just a slow wash of blue from nowhere, lighting the interior of my car like a silent disco. And then I heard the radio. Not mine. I'd turned mine off. This was a distant police scanner crackling from somewhere outside. I couldn't understand the words. They slurred and warped like someone speaking underwater, but I recognized the cadence. Dispatch codes. Officer IDs. Then I heard Wade's voice. "I'm 10-7, he said. I froze. That was his sign-off. Off duty. Not something you'd say in a panic. Not something you'd say if you were calling for help. I opened the door. The lights flickered again, brighter now. And as I stepped out, the blue flared across the trees like lightning, revealing shapes. There were people in the woods. Dozens, lining both sides of the road. Their clothes hung wrong. Ripped, inside out, drenched in something slick. Some of them looked like cops. One had half a face, but the rest was wearing a uniform that still had a name tag. Alvarez. They didn't move. Not at first. Just watched. Then. They whispered, all of them at once. Same phrase over and over, like a wind slipping through a throat. He stayed. He stayed. He stayed. I turned. The blue lights bled down the road again, forming into the vague shape of a car without edges. No wheels. No driver. Just an outline of something familiar, flickering in pulses. I backed up, slipped on the gravel. That's when I felt something warm grab my ankle, not a hand. It was slick, like raw meat wrapped in fabric. I didn't look. I kicked. It let go. I dove back into my car and slammed the door. The engine stuttered twice before turning over. As I threw it into reverse, I swear I saw my brother standing in the middle of the road, not waving, not smiling, just watching. His eyes were missing, and his skin had that inside-out look like the others. But it was him. And he mouthed something. I don't know what. I couldn't read it through the tears. The lights chased me halfway back down the lane before vanishing. No car. No sirens. Just the memory of that static. I made it home. Barely. The next day. I checked the recording. Nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing and 24 minutes of silence. No scanner. No voices. No way. I went to the sheriff's office. Told them everything. Showed them the coordinates. They smiled. We already responded, the deputy said. I asked what they meant. He just looked at me. Sighed. That case was closed years ago. Didn't you get the report? They had my name on it. Filed under missing persons. Date of death. September 17th, 2023. Same night I drove out. I don't remember leaving that report, but I remember the blue lights. And I remember what they took. I haven't gone back. But I hear them some nights. Outside. Flashing. Waiting for me to forget. Every town in Texas has a stretch of road folks don't much talk about. Not because they're scared exactly, but because talking about it seems to stir something up. FM 441 runs outside of Clayband, a place that barely shows up on any reel. Map. It cuts through a strip of farmland that hasn't grown anything since the 70s, all clay dirt and dried mesquite, flanked by rusted wire fences and gnarled cedar posts that lean like old men holding secrets. Folks pass through fast, and with windows up. They don't stop, not even to piss. Especially not at night. It was in July, 2 summers back, when I first heard about the thing on FM 441. I was running long-haul deliveries out of Lubbock, mostly night routes because I liked the stillness. Gave me time to think, made me feel like I was the last man on earth sometimes. That particular night, my dispatcher rerouted me due to a storm cell building near I-10, and the system spat out an alternate path, rural, 2-lane, winding east through towns I'd never heard of. One of them was Claybend. My GPS nudged me toward FM 441. Around 2 a.m., I remember the time because I looked down to adjust the dash clock. It had frozen at 2:13, even though I knew I'd passed that moment minutes ago. The road itself was darker than most. Not just a lack of lights, there was something thick about the air. My high beams bounced weird, like they were pushing through fog that wasn't there. I rolled down the window for some air and was hit with this smell-burnt rubber, like someone just laid down a patch of tire after slamming on the brakes, only it was sharper. There was also this undercurrent of metal, hot and acidic. Then, I heard it, a pop? Not loud, but enough to make me ease off the gas. Another pop, then a hiss, long and drawn out, like a radiator bleeding dry. I looked up just in time to see smoke drifting across the road, silver blue in the headlights. I slowed to a crawl. That's when I saw it, a semi, or what was left of one. It was overturned in a ditch off the shoulder, angled up like something had tossed it sideways. The cab was crushed flat, glass shattered across the ground like ice. The trailer had split open, spilling God knows what across the roadside looked like furniture, but none of it made sense. A love seat without cushions, a coat rack snapped. In half, a child's rocking horse splintered down the middle. Everything was burnt around the edges, not engulfed in flames, but scorched like it had cooked too long in a slow fire. And the tires, they were still smoking. All 18 of them hissing gently, even though there wasn't a single lick of flame to be seen. I pulled over, half in shock, half out of duty. You see something like that, you call it in. I grabbed my phone but had no bars. Not a single dot. I tried to see be dead static. The smoke was drifting, not just across the road but into my cab, even with the windows up. I could smell it again, burnt rubber and something sweeter now, like old oil and blood. Then I saw movement near the back of the trailer. Just a flicker. I leaned forward, peering through the windshield. Nothing. But the air felt off. Not cold, exactly, but dead, hollow. The kind of stillness you only feel after something's gone. Very wrong. Then I saw the cab door creak open. I swear to God, it moved slow, deliberate. A man climbed out. He looked wrong from the start, too tall, too narrow, skin like wax melted over bone. He wore a driver's uniform, maybe red once, but it was faded, washed out, soaked dark at the chest like he'd taken a pipe through the heart. He stumbled forward and stared right at me, not just a glance. He locked eyes and I froze. There was no light in his face. No recognition, no pain. Just that dead, blank expression you see on crash victims in the paper. He raised a hand, palm, open like he wanted to wave or maybe reach for help. I slammed the truck into reverse and burned rubber backing up. I turned hard and tore down the road, not caring about speed traps or ditches. I didn't stop until I hit a Whataburger parking lot 10 miles down the line. The manager there looked up from behind the counter and said I looked like hell. I asked him to call 911, told him there was a wreck back up the road. They sent a cruiser and an ambulance. I waited, shaking, sipping water that tasted like melted pennies. A deputy came back around 3:30, said he'd driven the stretch 3 times. There was nothing there. No wreck, no smoke, no skid marks. He said, "Are you sure you weren't dreaming, son?" I nearly punched him. Then he asked me something odd. He leaned in and said, "Was it around 2:13?" I nodded and he just sighed. We get stories like this. Always at 2:13. Always the same damn road. He said the original wreck happened in '96. A driver named Caleb Turner hauling salvaged furniture went off the road in heavy rain. They said he must have fallen asleep or dodged a deer. The whole rig rolled, burst into flames. The furniture he was hauling had come from an estate sale. Some old ranch house down in Fayette County burned out months before the auction. People said the furniture was cursed, haunted, whatever. Silly talk. But after the crash, things got strange. Sightings. Smoke on the road. People claiming they saw the wreck again and again. Every time. The tires were still smoking. They tried closing the road for a while. Didn't help. The wreck showed up anyway, even when the road was chained off. Some locals said it wasn't a ghost, it was a loop-like time had frayed at that spot and kept replaying the last seconds of Caleb Turner's life. Folks who stopped to help sometimes went missing. Others came back babbling, burned, or worse. One guy showed up in a church. Parking lot covered in soot, eyes gone milky. He never spoke again. I didn't sleep for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that crushed cab, that figure climbing out, those tires smoking like they were trying to tell me something. I got rid of that rig within the month. Started driving day shifts only. I still avoid FM 441 like the plague. But sometimes when I'm near Claybend, I'll hear it on the CB, static giving way to a soft hiss. A voice muttering something about furniture in the road. And always the timestamp reads 2:13. And here's the part that haunts me most. 3 weeks ago, I got a call from a buddy who still runs night freight. Said he passed through that area, got rerouted off 77. He said he saw a truck. Smoking in the ditch, looked like a crash just happened. He stopped to help. Said a man climbed out, real slow, bleeding from the chest. He swore the guy looked right at him and raised his hand, like he was reaching for something. I asked him what time it was when he saw it. He said, "Weirdest thing. My dash clock froze at 2:13. It started around the 3rd week of June, right after the rains had passed and the humidity returned with that wet, heavy cling that made your skin feel like it belonged to someone else. That's when folks in Newton Hollow began whispering about the girl. At first, it was truckers' men hauling freight out past the loop near Farm Road 308, mostly night drivers who swore they saw her perched on the hood of an old Ford Taurus, sitting perfectly still under the busted floodlight outside the closed-down mill diner. The kind of diner that still had paper menus taped to the windows and an ice machine that hadn't worked in a decade. They said she wore a red dress. Not bright red, not lipstick red, but a darker red, like dried blood after it set in fabric for too long. They said she had no shoes, and she never moved. Just sat there on the hood like it still belonged to her, like she was waiting for someone who hadn't shown up yet and never would. Nobody local paid it much mind at first. Newton Hollow isn't the kind of place where things happen until they do. And then you wish they hadn't. People chalked it up to late hours and too much caffeine. Maybe some meth sprinkled in for color, but then teenagers started seeing her too. One girl, Casey Bell from up on Finch Road, said she saw the woman while riding in her boyfriend's Dodge. She said the headlights caught her bare feet on rusted hood metal, hair blowing sideways in a wind that wasn't there, and eyes locked straight on her. Not on her boyfriend, not on the car, but on Casey. She said she felt like something cold reached down her throat and grabbed her spine. They didn't stop, didn't honk, didn't breathe until they were 3 miles up the road. Casey said she puked out the window and cried for 2 days. Said she still wakes up some nights because she dreams of that stare, the way it peeled back something inside her. Then someone honked. That was Jed Weller, the guy who used to fix the gas pumps out by the county line before he got laid off. Folks said he liked his drink more than his tools, and maybe that was true, but Jed was never the kind of guy to lie just to stir the pot. He told everyone at Curly's bar that he saw the girl on the hood around 12:30 a.m., sitting there like a statue. He thought it'd be funny to tap the horn, scare her a little, make her run off like all the other loons and meth heads that sometimes drifted into that part of town. But she didn't run. She didn't flinch. Jed said she slid. That's the word he used. Said she came off the hood without bending her knees, without jumping or stepping down, just slid like a ragdoll, smooth and soundless until her feet hit the pavement. Then she stood up and smiled. Jed swore her mouth didn't. Opened the right way, that the corners pulled back too far and the teeth went too deep, like there were too many of them and not enough tongue. Then she walked. Not toward his truck, not away, just around the vehicle in one slow circle, dragging her fingers across the metal as she moved. Leaving streaks, he said, looked like rust but smelled like meat left out in the sun. Yet's truck wouldn't start after that. He said he tried the ignition 5 times before giving up and crawling into the back seat with a tire iron. He stayed there until sunrise, and when he finally dared to look out the window, the girl was gone. But something had scratched the word "again" into the hood of his truck, deep, like with a key or a claw. Nobody laughed at Jed. Not after that. It was about a week later when folks noticed the girl started showing up earlier. Before, she only came out after midnight, but then she was there at 11, then 10. By early July, she was seen just after sundown, sitting on that same hood in that same red dress, eyes fixed on whatever unlucky soul had business out past the Mill Diner. But always the same rule. Don't honk. The weird part? Nobody could get close. One night, Deputy Lane tried. Thought maybe it was a prank or a runaway with some kind of mental break. Drove out in his cruiser, lights on, dash cam rolling. Got out of the car and took maybe 5 steps before his flashlight died. Whole cruiser went dead 2 engine. Lights, radio, the whole thing, like someone pulled the plug on the universe. He said he turned to go back, and the girl was suddenly standing beside his cruiser, head cocked to one side like she was studying a bug. Lane didn't say what he saw after that. He just transferred 2 weeks later to El Paso and never said goodbye to anyone. Things got worse after the 4th of July. It was like the heat had broken something open in the ground. Cattle started acting strange. People said their dogs wouldn't go near the stretch of road by the diner. Even birds avoided it. One guy, a salesman from San Marcos, drove through without knowing the story and honked when he saw her. No one's seen him since. His rental car was found abandoned 10 miles south, parked on a service road with the keys still in the ignition and the engine cold. The driver's seat was soaked in something that wasn't quite blood. Red, but thick and smelling. Of copper and something fouler. Kids dared each other to go out there, of course. That's what kids do. But after one boy didn't come home, a freshman named Luke with a cleft in his chin and a smart-mouthed parents started locking their doors early. His bike was found leaned up against the busted fence around the diner, front tire spinning slow. Back one bent like it had been kicked. No blood, no sign of a struggle. Just one of his shoes resting on the hood of the Taurus. They put up roadblocks after that. Sheriff Brandt said it was unsafe to drive near the old mill. Sinkholes, he claimed. Erosion. But everyone in Newton Hollow knew the truth. You just didn't go out there anymore. And if you did, you sure as hell didn't honk. Still. Some people are stubborn. Last week, a guy came through in a black SUV with California plates. Saw the girl. Thought it was a joke, probably. Locals said he honked 5 times, each one longer than the last. By the third honk, the windows on the SUV started fogging from the inside. By the fifth, the windshield cracked down the center. When the sheriff showed up the next morning, the SUV was still idling, empty, doors locked from the inside. No sign of the driver, just the girl, back on her hood, staring at the diner like nothing had happened. And now, folks say she's not just waiting at the diner anymore. Someone spotted her down by the river bridge, 20 miles from the original spot. Another saw her standing outside the gas station near Harper Lane, just standing, still, watching. Same red dress, same bare feet, same dead stare. So now, there's a new rule in Newton Hollow. If you see a girl in a red dress sitting on a car hood or standing by the road after dark, don't honk. Don't stare. Don't slow down. Just drive. Pray the road stays straight. And whatever you do, don't stop, because if you do, she slide and she smile, and you'll never make it home. It was around 11:30 at night when I passed the stretch of Highway 82 between Seymour and Benjamin. That long, lonesome piece of Texas blacktop that rolls through dry grass and rattling mesquite. The moon had that sickly, yellowish tint, like it had been watching something it didn't like. I was running late getting back from a job I should have turned down, a short repair gig on an oil pump jack out near Guthrie. Cash under the table, greasy hands, some grizzled foreman with breath like burnt cigarettes. It wasn't worth it, and it definitely wasn't worth driving back this late. But I wanted to sleep in my own bed, not some saggy-ass motel with roaches nesting in the corners. That's what I kept telling myself when I saw him. He was standing just past a shallow bend in the road, not moving, not even pretending to thumb. A ride. Just standing dead still in the shoulder's gravel with his hands hanging limp at his sides like a cutout pasted onto the landscape. I thought maybe it was a scarecrow at first. There'd been stories about people planting them out here to keep coyotes away from their calves or junkyards, but when I got closer, I saw real skin. Pale, ash-white skin, caked in dust and blood or something thicker. He had no shoes. Just filthy feet, dark with crusted mud. His jeans were torn in a dozen places, like he'd crawled out of a barbed wire fence or maybe up from a hole. And his mouth, Jesus, his mouth was stitched shut. I don't mean swollen or glued or metaphorical. Either. I mean black twine pulled tight through the skin of his lips, puckering them together in a zigzag line that glistened with dried blood under the high beams. Should have kept driving. God knows I should have. But I braked. Not all the way, just enough that my back tires skidded a little on the gravel. I rolled the window down, half ready to shout something, maybe ask if he was okay, but my throat went dry. He took 2 steps toward the truck. I don't know why I unlocked the passenger door. I don't remember reaching for the button. But it clicked. That sound echoed like thunder in the dead silence of the highway. No crickets, no wind. Just the soft crunch of his bare feet approaching the cab. He didn't ask. Couldn't. But he opened the door and climbed in like we'd made a deal. I stared at him as he settled in, arms resting on his lap like a doll. His chest was heaving a little, slow and deep, but not from exertion. More like something learning how to breathe. He smelled like wet dirt and moldy wood. I finally found my voice and asked, "Where you headed?" He turned those eyes on me. I don't remember their color, only that they looked like they belonged in someone else's skull. Not crazy or BLOODSHOT dash, just ... borrowed ... He didn't speak. Couldn't, obviously, but then he did something worse. He pointed straight ahead. I asked again, quieter this time. You got a name? Nothing. He looked straight out the windshield. Like he was done being part of the conversation. My gut screamed to stop the truck, kick him out, maybe call a sheriff and explain that some poor bastard had wandered out of a nightmare. But the road rolled under us like it was dragging me forward against my will. The GPS flickered, then shut off completely. Cell signal vanished. Radio turned to nothing but static, even on the Mexican stations that usually bled through out here. We drove in silence for 30 miles, maybe more. I passed turnoffs I should have recognized, farm roads, busted old barns. A gas station near Vera that's always lit up like a UFO in the dark, but none of them looked right. The land was ... wrong, like it had been redrawn ... and then he moved. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a piece of paper, slid it onto the dashboard. I glanced at it quick and almost swerved off the road. It was a map. Hand dash drawn in dark. Ink, maybe charcoal. It looked like the county, but off somehow no town names, just shapes and arrows, X's and slashes. One road snaked all the way to a black circle in the bottom right corner. He tapped it with his finger. Nowhere, I said out loud, trying to sound casual. You want a ride to nowhere? He looked at me again, and I realized with a jolt of cold sweat that the stitches weren't recent. They weren't healing either. The skin around them was bruised black, necrotic, like it had died a long time ago. Like it had sealed his mouth for good. I turned onto a road I didn't remember. Not on instinct, not on purpose, it was like the truck made the turn for me. The asphalt narrowed into cracked gravel. The grass on either side grew tall and silver. In the headlights. We kept driving. The air got heavier, humid. The smell changed too, from mesquite and cattle to mildew and rot, like something wet had been rotting for a century. I kept glancing at him, waiting for him to do something, to make a sound, but he just sat there, hands folded, head straight, a passenger with no intention of leaving. Then the trees came. I didn't think there were trees like this in Texas. Towering. Black trunks, gnarled like they'd grown from pain itself. Moss hanging like rotting skin. I slowed down, but the road just kept stretching. Time felt broken. My watch stopped ticking. I don't know how long we were in there. Hours, a day, more. I tried turning around once. Just once. The road behind us was gone. Not just obscured ore. Curve gone. Just thick, choking woods where my tire track should have been. And the second I tried backing up, he turned to me, shook his head once. That's all it took. I kept driving. We reached the circle on the map sometime after that. I say sometime because the sky had no stars and the moon was gone. The clearing was flat and empty, a pit of cold air rinned by dead oaks and the smell of iron. At the center was a structure, maybe a house once, maybe a church. All that was left were beams and a doorway standing upright with no door. No walls, just splinters and shadow. He got out. He didn't say thank you, didn't look back. He walked to the doorway and stood there. Then he turned around and pointed at me. I didn't get out. I didn't breathe. He raised his hand slowly, like a conductor starting a symphony of silence. And then I heard it. Voices. Not around us, inside us. Inside me. Dozens of them, clawing. Up from the base of my spine into my skull. Whispers and sobs and screams and chanting, all tangled together in a sound that wasn't sound at all. And I saw things in my mind, black hills crawling with figures, an ocean of faces with sewn mouths, bleeding hands scratching at windows that didn't exist. And then he walked through the frame. He vanished, just like that. I turned the truck around, or maybe it turned itself and drove. When I finally made it back to the highway, the sun was rising. My watch was ticking again. Phone had service. But the gas tank read empty, even though I'd filled it in Guthrie. The truck smelled like wet soil and ashes. And on the passenger seat where he'd sat, there was a single stitch, threaded through with dried blood. I still drive that road sometimes. Can't help it. It pulls at me. But I never stop anymore, not for anyone. Especially if they've got no shoes. Back in late October, before the first freeze, I drove out to Tin Hollow looking for an old cemetery that some genealogy freak on Reddit said had my great-grandmother's name carved in sandstone. My dad had never mentioned her, and Mom only talked about her side of the family, which made me curious enough to burn a weekend and follow a bad map into the far edges of East Texas. Tin Hollow wasn't on most GPS apps anymore, and the road that led to it, County Route 18, hadn't seen maintenance since maybe the 1980s. The yellow line was faded to a whisper, and trees leaned in from both sides like tired old men hanging their heads. I passed a rusted mailbox hanging open like a slack jaw and saw nothing but pine, scrub oak, and the occasional rotted fence post swallowed by vine. My cell lost signal 10 miles back, but I kept going. I'm stubborn like that. Or dumb, I saw the bridge a good half-mile before I reached it. It looked like nothing at first, just a hump in the road, but then the slope sharpened, and I saw the black iron guardrails twisted like melted candy canes. Somebody had spray-painted "Go Back" on one side and nitrogen monoxide water on the other. The asphalt peeled away from the bridge at both ends like skin from a wound, and the air turned cold, fast, like someone cracked a basement window. I pulled over just before the incline. My tires crunched over gravel and glass. The passenger side mirror caught something white along the ditch, and for a second, I thought I saw a woman's face, just hanging there, pale and too smooth, like the top of a mannequin in a bridal shop. When I turned my head, it was gone. I stepped out. Everything was quiet in that way that screams. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my boots on brittle weeds and the slow ticking of my cooling engine. The bridge had no nameplate, just a rusted-out signpost hanging empty like a gallows. I walked toward the center. My boots echoed on the asphalt, loud and sharp, and that's when I noticed something wrong with the sound. There was a delay. I'd step thump, and then, about a second later, I'd hear a dull, muffled response, like my steps were bouncing back from underneath. I knelt down and pressed my palm to the surface. Warm, oddly warm. I lay flat and pressed my ear to the road. That's when I heard the scream. It wasn't close. It wasn't loud. But it was clear as a bell ringing through a thick fog. Someone, maybe a woman, screaming her lungs raw somewhere down below. But the bridge crossed nothing. No creek, no ravine. I walked to the side and looked over. Just dry earth. Clay and gravel packed tight with sun-baked weeds and stumps. But the scream came again, this time louder, and it didn't fade, it cut off. Like a recording stopping mid-reel. I backed up, almost stumbled. Got back in the car, locked the doors without thinking. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was a bird. Some weird-ass bird call echoing wrong. Maybe a prank. I sat there breathing, watching the road ahead. The bridge shimmered slightly in the heat, the metal railings twitching with mirage. I should have turned around, but I didn't. I crossed the bridge. About 10 feet past it, the road dipped again, and there just beyond a thicket of dogwood was Tin Hollow. At least what was left of it. 4 or 5 leaning structures, all bowed inward like they'd been praying for too long. A church with no steeple. A shack with a porch full of broken chairs and an open door that creaked even though there was no wind. And in the middle of it all, the cemetery. Just like the post had said, but it wasn't like any cemetery I'd ever seen. No grass. No path. Just broken stones sunk into cracked mud. Some tilted so far they might have been buried bones themselves. A rusted gate stood open, the hinges blown out like they'd been hit with a shotgun. I walked in, scanning names, tracing fingers over. Worn letters. The third row in, I found it Mary Langston died 1903. My dad's mother's name had been Langston. There it was, clear as day, carved into soft sandstone that hadn't crumbled yet. Underneath, in smaller, fresher letters, was one word: listen. I stared at it. I hadn't seen that in the Reddit photo. I touched it, and the stone was vibrating, just slightly, like a phone buzzing in a pocket. I stepped back and looked around. That's when I noticed every single headstone had something added to it. One said run, another said stay quiet, a third, don't scream. They weren't carved like the names. They were etched shallow, newer, almost scratched with a nail. I turned to leave and heard the scream again, this time from beneath the cemetery dotted. Rose up, fast, raw, like someone trapped in a tunnel right under my feet. Then another, from farther away. Then a third, closer. I sprinted toward the car, back the way I came. But when I reached the bridge again, something was standing in the middle of it. It was a man, or had been. He stood crooked, like one leg was shorter than the other, and his head lolled too far. To the left, like it had been broken and forgotten. His arms were long, almost too long, and his fingers touched the ground as he walked. His face was blank, not empty, just wrong. No nose. Just a slit where the mouth should have been, and eyes. Like water stains. He didn't move fast. Just stepped slowly toward me. I backed away and saw more movement beneath the bridge. Shapes shifting under the dirt, rising toward the surface. The muffled screams were louder now, surrounding me. Some were sobbing, some were laughing. But they were all below. I jumped in the car, turned the key, slammed it into reverse. The man didn't run. He just stood there watching, the edges of his face twitching like wet paper. I floored it, backpedaled down the road until I hit something that made the rear bounce. I didn't look back again. I drove until I saw a cell tower and kept driving past that until I hit a gas station with a busted pump and a clerk who stared too long at the dirt on my boots. I posted about it once. The Reddit thread vanished. My photos came out blacked out every now and then. Usually around 3 a.m., I hear that scream again. From under my bed, from the vents. Once from the inside of my own throat. I haven't gone back to Tin Hollow. The bridge isn't on any maps. I checked, but I can still feel the hum in the road when I drive too far east, and sometimes, I swear I see him again, just past the edge of the headlights, waiting, listening, and underneath, it all just dirt and bone. I left Uvalde a little after midnight, the kind of late where the world feels like it's forgotten to breathe. The diner I'd been sitting in had shut down for cleaning, and the waitress had given me that soft, apologetic smile that meant it was time to go. I'd been nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring at the vinyl booth across from me, thinking about nothing and everything all at once. The kind of tired that runs deeper than your muscles. I hadn't really planned to drive through the night, but the idea of another motel bed and the stink of mildew on stiff sheets didn't sound much better. So I hit the road, aiming for Eagle Pass where a cousin had promised a couch and a cold. Beer. Highway 83 stretched out like a black ribbon between shadows. I remember how the air felt, still and heavy, as if something was waiting just off the shoulder in the mesquite thickets. My headlights cut through the darkness in a yellow arc, and the road ahead shimmered from the day's heat still radiating off the asphalt. The first 40 miles or so passed in silence, save for the hum of tires and the occasional crackle of static from a broken FM station I hadn't switched off yet, somewhere between La Pryor and a gas station that hadn't been open in 10 years. I noticed the light. At first, I figured it was just another car coming up behind me. Two brights way off in the distance. Only they never seemed to gain on me. I glanced in the mirror now and then, just enough to track the approach, but the Distance stayed the same. Brights on. Always. A little irritating, honestly. I slowed a bit to let them pass. They didn't. I pulled into a gravel turnout and waited. Nothing. Just me and the crickets. And those two beams glowing like twin suns in the dark, unmoving. I got out of the car to take a better look, shading my eyes. That's when the silence hit me. Thick, unnatural. The kind of silence that swallows even your own breathing. Not a single chirp, not a breeze. Just those lights about 50 yards back. No engine hum. No outline of a car. Just two blinding. White circles hanging in midair, staring me down like a predator in tall grass. I backed into the driver's seat, uneasy, and pulled back onto the highway. The lights followed. Not fast. Not close. Just steady. Always the same distance, same brightness. I turned the radio up just to fill the space, but all that came through was a preacher screaming about sin and fire, his voice warped like it was coming through a wet paper bag. I shut it off. By the time I hit Batesville, I was sweating despite the AC. My hands were tight on the wheel, and I'd stopped checking the mirror. Because the lights were always there. Always. I made a quick right turn onto a county road that led to a feed store I remembered from childhood, thinking I could lose whatever this was. Gravel popped under my tires. A gust of wind finally kicked. Up dust and dry leaves across the ditch. I stopped the car. Killed the engine, sat in the dark. For a few seconds, I felt alone again. I even let myself laugh, soft and dumb, like maybe I just needed sleep. But then, from the rearview mirror, the lights blinked on again. Closer now, no sound, no car. Just light. It didn't cast shadows either. Everything stayed flat and gray, like light from a television screen. I opened the door, stepped out, and yelled, "Enough." It echoed back at me in a strange, hollow way, like yelling inside a metal silo. The lights didn't move, didn't flicker, didn't blink. They just stared. I drove fast after that. Reckless, really. Tires skidding on dirt curves. Nearly clipped a fence post. Every time I risked a look, the lights were still there. No road noise behind me. No vehicle. Just those awful, patient beams. Around 3 a.m., I pulled into the parking lot of a little roadside church with a busted neon cross. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I got out and went inside, they'd stay behind. Sanctuary, right? But the church was locked, boarded up like it hadn't been used in decades. Dust covered the windows. No signs of life, except when I turned around. They were closer now. I swear to God, they were only 20 feet back. Still no vehicle. No wires, just light. Intense enough to burn after images into my retinas. I couldn't look at them long, but I couldn't ignore them either. My heart beat hard in my chest, almost painful. Something deep inside, some old part of the brain that remembers being prey, told me I was in danger. Real, ancient danger. Walked backwards toward the church steps, but as I did, the air got cold. Not cool, cold. My breath fogged, my skin prickled. The lights began to shift, not moving forward or back, but sort of shivering in place. Like they were vibrating just beneath the surface of reality. I don't have better words for it. They pulsed, each beat in sync with the throbbing behind my eyes. Then the smell hit me. Not ozone. Not gas. Meat. Rotten, open meadow in August meat. Like something had died in the crawl space and nobody found it until the heat cooked it into jelly. Stumbled, gagging. The lights flared, brighter than ever, and I saw something move between them. A shape, no features. Just a suggestion of something tall, thin, and wrong. My mind refused to hold it. Like it bled out of the edges of vision the longer I looked. Got back in the car and drove like hell. Eagle Pass came up just before dawn. My cousin's house was dark, quiet, peaceful. I parked the car in front, engine still running, and waited. 30 minutes, an hour, the lights never came into town. They never crossed the last streetlight, like they didn't belong on this side of something invisible. Something old. I rang the doorbell with a shaking hand. My cousin answered in his boxers, blinking at me like I was a stray dog. I must have looked like one. "What the hell happened to you?" I didn't answer right away. I turned, pointed back the way I came. "Something followed me from Uvalde," I said. But it stopped right at the edge, like it couldn't come in. He didn't laugh, didn't joke. Just nodded and opened the door wide. "Good," he said, "because out here, things don't follow you. They wait." And from the mirror in his hallway, I swear I saw a flicker of light, twin white dots, just for a second, watching from the shadows. They say the road curves sharp near mile marker 148, just past the black mesquite line where the pavement buckles from old heat and tire-slick desperation. It's a stretch locals call Devil's Curve, though you won't find that name on any map or GPS. Truckers who've driven Texas long enough know to flick off their high beams when they hit that bend after midnight. It's not for safety, it's respect. Some don't even talk about it unless they've had a few drinks and the lights are low dot. It was early September when I first heard about it. I was sitting in an old booth at Pop's Diner off I-20 near Sweetwater. One of those trucker spots that smells like burned coffee, diesel sweat, and the faint trace of fried lard from a decade back. I'd been on the road for 16 hours, hauling empty pallets from El Paso to Dallas, making just enough to keep my rig afloat and my debt from swallowing me whole. That night, the counter guy, grizzled, missing a tooth, and leaning heavy on one elbow, warned me about Devil's Curve. "Don't pick up no one near that turn," he said, stirring his coffee with a busted fork. "Not even if they're crying. Not even if they look hurt. Especially not if they're barefoot." He never explained why. Just stared through me like he was watching someone crawl out of my shadow. I laughed it off and paid my bill, thinking the old man was just soft in the head from truck fumes and caffeine. I should have listened. I hit the stretch around 2:47 a.m. The road was empty, windless, even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. The moon was up but heavy with cloud cover, that kind of humid yellow glow that makes everything look jaundiced and wrong. I was down to half a tank, the hum of the tires lulling me into that slow highway hypnosis where the white lines blur and you forget your last exit. That's when I saw him. He stood just past the curve's rise, near a metal guardrail eaten through with rust. A skinny guy, maybe late 20s, dark pants, white shirt soaked at the collar, holding a duffel bag in one hand. No shoes. Just bare feet pressed to the crumbling shoulder like they didn't feel the gravel. He didn't wave. Didn't stick out a thumb. He just stared, head tilted like he was studying something behind me. I almost passed him. I still don't know why I slowed down. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe I remembered the old man's warning too late, but my foot moved on its own, easing off the gas. The truck slowed with a sigh, engine whispering down from its high whine, and I rolled the window halfway. "You stuck." "Man," I called. He looked at me, but didn't speak. His face was pale, like the kind of pale that isn't skin, but something deeper like light had been drained out of him. He nodded once, slow, like it cost him something. I unlocked the passenger, sighed and leaned over to pop the door. He climbed in without a word. The smell hit me first. Not rot or sweat like you'd expect, but something sour, almost metallic, like the inside of a burnt coin or blood on hot aluminum. He settled into the seat, set the duffel on his lap, and buckled in with mechanical calm. "Where to?" I asked. He turned his head, not fast, just deliberately. "Around the bend," he said, that voice. It wasn't hoarse or broken. It was smooth, too smooth, like a radio DJ whispering through a dream. I nodded, not really understanding why I kept driving, but I did. The road dipped into the curve. That long, slow, banking right. The kind that never ends if you don't fight the wheel. The headlights cut a path through the dark, revealing cracked signs, overgrown grass, and the occasional shredded tire husk. And still, the bend didn't straighten. I frowned. This curve's longer than I remember. I muttered. The hitchhiker didn't answer. Just stared ahead, eyes wide, mouth closed, fingers tightening around the straps of his duffel. A minute passed. Then 2, then 5, still curving. Still the same metal guardrail running the side. Still the same trees, bent low and twisted like they were trying to whisper something to the asphalt. I looked at my GPS. It spun like it had been dropped in. A blender, no signal, no direction. I glanced at the time, 2:47 a.m. still. I tapped the dash. Hit the display. Nothing changed. "You messin' with my system?" I asked, trying to keep the fear from my voice. My fingers were cold, even though the cab was still warm. He looked at me again, slower this time. "You picked me up," he. SAID. I slammed the brakes. The truck skidded, not from speed, but like the road itself rejected the stop. The tires squealed, the whole rig shuddered, and we came to a dead halt in the middle of that never-ending curve. I put it in park, heart thudding like a war drum. "Get out," I said. He didn't move. I reached over to open his door, but the handle snapped off in my hand like it was made of plastic. I cursed, grabbing my phone, but the screen flickered and died. No signal, no power, just dead black glass. Then he opened the duffel. Inside was a pair of boots, old, leather cracked and dark, and something else. A blood-stained road map of Texas with a single route circled in red, over and over again. The same bend. I looked at his feet again. Still bare. "Put them on," I said, not sure why I was pleading. He shook his head. "There. Not mine anymore." I stared at the map, at the blood, at the boots that were maybe his once, maybe someone else's now. "How do we get out of this?" I asked, feeling the madness curl up around the corners of my eyes like steam in a closed bathroom. He smiled. "But not at me. You don't." And then I was driving again. Still turning, still stuck on that same damn bend. I don't know how long it's been. The fuel gauge doesn't move. The clock doesn't tick. The engine hums, and I drive, always with him beside me, never speaking again, never blinking. Sometimes I see others on the shoulder. New ones, barefoot, holding duffels or bags or just their arms like something's missing. They never wave. They never move. Just stand and wait. And sometimes someone else pulls over. I see their brake lights, red and stupid in the dark. I scream at them, honk, flash, but they don't hear me. They never do. I watch them open their passenger door. And then they're behind me, caught, curving forever. There are more headlights now. A line of us, all caught on the same endless turn. Some crying, some silent, some grinning wide like the madness finally gave them peace. You might find yourself there someday, rounding that same slow bend near mile 148. If you see someone barefoot, don't stop. Don't even look. Just keep going. Because if you pick him up, the road never ends, and neither do you. The first time I heard the horn, I was headed west on Highway 71, somewhere past Smithville and not quite to Bastrop. It was just after dusk, that soft purple hour where everything looks dipped in smoke. The sun had disappeared behind the pine curtain, and the air felt thick, not hot exactly, but slow, like it took effort just to breathe. I'd been driving a few hours already, coming from a job site in La Grange, and my GPS had rerouted me to avoid construction. I didn't recognize the road, but it was Texas roads twist and veer like old snakes, and you get used to letting the map guide you. Then the traffic stopped. No big red sea of brake lights, no slow down curve, just stopped. 1 second I was moving along just fine. The next I was bumper to bumper with nothing but the green of the pine woods. To either side, an empty stretch of faded asphalt ahead. I checked my mirrors, expecting a line of trucks behind me, but the road was clear behind too. I figured it might have been a logging truck or an overturned semi up ahead, maybe a deer strike. Maybe someone clipped a stray cow. This was Texas. After all, I shifted into park and rolled down my window. The cicadas had started up, a humming white noise, and the smell of pine sap clung thick in the air. And then it came, the horn. At first, I thought it was just someone being impatient. Maybe a work van farther back leaning on it. But it wasn't that kind of horn. This one was deeper, like the air itself grown through a tunnel. It wasn't sharp or shrill. It didn't sound angry. It sounded wrong. Mechanical, sure, but not modern. Almost like a train horn, but it was off in pitch. Slightly flat, like an old recording played back on dying batteries. Long, too long. I glanced around, but there was nothing in the rear view. Just the tall trees and the hazy shimmer of heat over cracked pavement. No headlights, no brake lights, no shapes between trunks. The horn kept going. Not in bursts, just one long, unbroken note, like something was coming and didn't care who. After maybe a minute, it stopped. That was worse somehow. The silence afterward felt hollow, like a pause before something else. I craned my neck out the window. Still nothing. And that's when I noticed the cars ahead, except they weren't really there. Or maybe they were, but not how they should be. There were 3 or 4 visible through my windshield, all lined up like Rush Hour, an old tan Corolla, a boxy maroon Suburban, a blue Ford pickup, but they weren't idling. No running lights, no exhaust. They looked parked, dusty, still. I hadn't seen them pull up, hadn't passed them. And when I looked closer, I realized none of them had drivers. I got out, slowly, the way you do when you're still trying to make sense of something and don't want to admit it might be dangerous. The gravel crunched under my boots as I stepped toward the Suburban in front. It was coated in a layer of grime, like it had sat out a few months. A tree branch had fallen across the hood, half rotted. One of the tires was flat and sunken. There was a kid's toy on the dash, an old plastic dinosaur faded nearly white. I knocked on the driver's window. Nothing. Tried the handle. Locked. The pickup behind it was the same dust on the windshield so thick I could write my name in it. I stepped back and looked around, heart thudding now, slow and confused. The sun had finally died out, and the trees were casting deep shadows across the road. The air had gone cool, but I felt sweat at the base of my spine, and then the horn came again. This time it was louder. It echoed off the trees and rumbled through my chest. I spun toward the sound, expecting headlights or a truck barreling out of the woods, but the road was still empty. The forest too. No movement. But the horn kept coming, and it wasn't fading. It was getting closer. I backed toward my car. Tried to convince myself maybe someone was playing a prank, some weird backwoods setup. Maybe a speaker rigged in the woods. Maybe a hunting blind with some teenager trying to freak people out. But then the blue Ford's headlights turned on. The Ford. Just for a second. The beams flared, sharp and white, then blinked off again. No engine. No hum. I froze. My breath felt like gravel in my throat. I turned, got in my car, locked the doors without thinking. When I looked forward again, the road ahead was empty. All the cars gone, not moved. Not driven away. Gone. The road was clear, blacktop stretching empty ahead. The trees leaning in like they wanted to whisper something I didn't want to hear. I put the car in drive. The GPS screen flickered once, then glowed red like the route was gone. I didn't care. I pushed the gas. The wheels spun, then gripped. But as I rolled forward, I heard something strange from behind the car. A dragging sound. Like metal on pavement. Then the horn again, so loud it made my vision buzz. I floored it, but the road didn't feel right anymore. It twisted wrong, bent subtly uphill when it shouldn't have. The trees leaned harder, forming almost a tunnel. The sky above had gone gray-black, no stars. And in my mirrors, I saw the headlights dot at first just a pale dot. Then 2 dot, then 4. 2. High to be cars dot too close together to be trucks. And they weren't beamed so much as glowing orbs. Pale, flickering, like the old gas lamps my grandfather kept in his barn. But they were coming fast and they didn't bounce or sway like a vehicle's. Light said. They floated, dead even, getting closer. I pushed 70, then 80. The car shook, but no matter how fast I went, the horn got louder. It wasn't just behind me now. It was inside. The sound filled the car, vibrated the windows, the air vents, the dash. My steering wheel trembled under my hands. My teeth hurt. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might bruise my ribs. And through the noise I thought I heard something else. Words low, drawn out, stretched like someone moaning underwater. Moved over. My hands jerked. I nearly lost control, and just then, a pair of red tail lights appeared up ahead. A vehicle. Finally, I almost cried. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't moving either. Parked sideways across the highway. An old wrecker, rusted through, cab door hanging open. I slammed the brakes. Tires screamed. The car fishtailed, then stopped a hair from the bumper. Behind me, the horn roared. I threw the door open and ran. Didn't look back. Ran past the wrecker, off the side of the highway, into the trees. Branches slapped my face. Roots caught my boots. I ran until the horn faded. Until I couldn't hear my heart or my breath or the insects. Just wind. Cold, sudden, sharp wind. When I looked back, the road was empty. No car. No wreck. Nothing. I walked for hours before a trucker found me. He said I looked like I'd seen a ghost. I told him I'd been in an accident. He called me in. State troopers said they found my vehicle the next morning parked neat and quiet just off the shoulder. Engine off. No damage. No sign of other cars. No traffic backup. No report of a wrecker blocking the highway. They asked if I'd been drinking. I hadn't. They asked if I wanted to speak to someone. I didn't. But I still hear that horn. Late at night. Long and low. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone on unfamiliar roads, I see headlights where they shouldn't be, pale, flickering, floating just above the pavement. And I swear, they're getting closer. It was a little after 11:30 p.m. when I turned off the main road and onto the narrow stretch of FM 2671 that cuts through the dry mesquite country between Sonora and Arizona. I'd driven that route a dozen times before on my way back from San Angelo, but something felt different that night. The moon was full and yellow, bloated like it had a fever, and it hovered low on the horizon like it was eavesdropping on the road. The air had that brittle hush to it, like sound didn't carry right, and even my tires seemed quieter than usual, humming soft on the asphalt as if they were afraid to draw attention. I had just crossed the rusted cattle guard where the road dips into a shallow draw, and that's when I saw it. Not a deer, not a person. It was movement fast and low. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield. Leaning forward like that would somehow sharpen the edges of what I was seeing. The beam of my headlights caught her just for a second of a pale figure scrambling out from behind a blue Mercury Grand Marquis parked crooked on the side of the road. Its driver door hung open like someone had jumped out mid-drive. She wasn't running, she was crawling. Pale arms pulling her forward, knees dragging under her like they didn't work anymore. Her hair was dark and tangled, matted down one side of her face. She wasn't crying or screaming or calling for help, just dragging herself across the shoulder of the road like she'd already accepted something was chasing her and she wasn't going to make it. She got almost to the edge of my headlights, and then froze, her head turning ever so slightly toward me. That's when I saw her face. The mouth looked wrong, wide, gaping, not like it was open to scream, but like it had been stretched that way. Her eyes caught the light for a second, and I swear they didn't blink. Just glassy and fixed. I hit the brakes. My first thought was maybe she'd been in an accident, maybe someone hurt her. I didn't see any blood, but that didn't mean anything. I rolled my window down and leaned out a little. "Ma'am, you need help?" She didn't answer, didn't move either. I could hear the engine idling, feel the heat from it against my arm, but she just stared at me. Then, all at once, she pushed herself backward, not turning around, not standing up, just slinking back like a crab toward the open trunk of the Grand Marquis. It was wide open now. I don't remember hearing it pop. 1 second it was shut, the next it gaped into blackness, and she went in. Head first. Like something had taken hold of her ankles and pulled. I threw the car in park and jumped out. I'm not a hero, but something about her. I couldn't just drive away. I got to the Grand Marquis in maybe 5 long strides, heart hammering like I was walking into a dare. The trunk was still open, empty, just old carpet and a cracked spare tire, no woman. I looked around. The grass by the roadside was dry and short, no place to hide. I called out again, louder this time, nothing, I don't remember making a decision to close the trunk. It just felt like it should be shut. So I slammed it. That's when I heard the sound behind me, my own car trunk clicking open. I spun around. Fast. It was open all the way. That heavy lid, which I knew I hadn't touched, was now sticking straight up. I stepped toward it slow. I hadn't touched the button. The key fob was still in my pocket. And I hadn't heard the latch. The inside was just as I left it. Some roadside tools, an old blanket, a red gas can. But the air around it was different, heavier, like the smell after rain, except it hadn't rained in weeks. There was a faint sound too, breathing, not mine. Wet, fast, and coming from somewhere down below the floor of the trunk. I slammed it shut. I got in the car and locked the doors, heart thudding in my throat, and sped off without another glance at the Grand Marquis. I told myself I imagined it, that I was tired, that it had been a trick of the light or heat stroke or something rational that could be explained with enough coffee and daylight. I didn't sleep that night, and the next morning, I tried to open my trunk to grab my tools, it wouldn't budge. Button didn't work. The key didn't work. Not even the emergency release from inside the car. I took it to a mechanic in Ozana, some guy named Frank, who'd been working on cars since the 70s. He fiddled with it for maybe 15 minutes before he stepped back, scratching at his neck. "This latch is fine," he said, "but it's stuck from the inside, like something's wedged in there." He offered to pry it open, but I told him no. Something deep in me, call it instinct, call it fear, call it plain old survival, didn't want it forced open. I drove off with it still. Locked tight. Weeks passed. I started to forget, or at least pretend I had. But things started changing. First, it was the smell. Not strong, but faint, earthy, damp, like something buried. Then the sound. Sometimes at night when the engine cooled, I'd hear the soft creak of the trunk hinge shifting, or a thud. Once, I heard a soft scratch like nails on metal dot, and then the dreams came dot in the dreams. I'm driving down FM 2671 again, but it's darker than I remember. No moon, no lights. And every time I see the same blue Grand Marquis parked off the road. Every time the trunk opens. And every time I watch myself crawl out of it. Not her me mouth wide and wrong, eyes glassy. And then I wake up, throat raw, heart racing, convinced that someone or something is still in the trunk. Not dead, not alive either. Just waiting. One night, a couple months after it all started, I was at a gas station outside Big Lake when a man pulled up next to me in an old Dodge truck. He was probably in his 60s, face windburned and eyes squinting like he'd stared at too many horizons. He pointed to my car and nodded. "You see her too?" I didn't answer. Couldn't? He just chuckled dry, like he'd already figured as much. "Mine won't open either. Not since '03. You keep driven. Keep moving. Don't stop too long. And whatever you do, don't try to dig into it. They don't like that." I drove off before I could ask him what he meant, but I understood, and now years later, I still drive. Sometimes I sleep in motels. Sometimes I nap in rest stops, windows cracked, keys in the ignition. But I never stay in one place for long, because sometimes I hear it back there breathing, shifting dot, and once, in a gas station window, I caught a reflection dot. It wasn't mine dot, it was her. Hair dark and MATTED dot, arms crawling forward. Face split wide open in a silent, endless scream. She was crawling out of the trunk. Again. And this time, I think she brought something with her. It started with a shortcut. I'd been driving all day, heading east through Texas from Laredo to Shreveport, after a last-minute cargo job had gone sideways and left me without pay. I was mad, hungry, and running low on gas. The sun was starting to bleed out on the horizon, and I didn't want to stop in some dusty motel off the interstate. I just wanted to get home. That's when my GPS rerouted me. I didn't think much of it. State Road 98, it said. Shaved 2 hours off the drive, it promised. Even looked like it'd be a smoother ride just along. Narrow stretch north through some backcountry until it spit me out onto Highway 79. I took it without question, turned off the main drag, and started down that 2-lane blacktop like I'd done 100 times before. Right away, something felt off. The air was too still. You know how in summer, the cicadas scream and the wind rustles the brush and every tree seems to creak under its own weight? There was none of that. No sound at all, not even from my radio, which had been working fine. Minutes ago, static now. I clicked it off and told myself it was just interference. Rural roads have dead zones. No big deal dot. About 5 minutes in, I passed a possum, dead. Looked fresh, blood still wet in the dirt, guts like sausages twisted out of its belly. I wrinkled my nose and drove on. Maybe 15 minutes later, I passed it again. Same possum. Same spot. Same exact position, legs curled in, eyes half open like it had been caught mid-blink. I slowed the truck and looked in the rearview mirror, but the possum disappeared behind the bend almost immediately. I told myself I must have been mistaken. There were a lot of roads out there that looked the same, and roadkill wasn't uncommon. Still, I glanced at the map on my phone. The blue dot showed me moving forward, but the road name didn't update. Still said State Road 98. Still no gas stations, no turns, no rest stops. Just this dark ribbon cutting through trees so thick. They leaned in like they were trying to whisper something through the windows. Another 10 minutes went by. Then I saw the billboard. It had been torn to hell, an old metal frame barreling up curling panels of paper. I caught just enough of the image to make out a smiling couple holding up cans of cola. Something from the 1970s maybe. A corner of the sign hung off and flapped in the wind that wasn't there. Just before I passed it, I noticed the woman's face was missing, peeled off, revealing some strange brown smudge underneath that looked too organic for old glue. Kept driving. And then I passed the same possum, the same damn billboard, same spot, same scream. That's right, I heard a scream. Right outside the driver's side window. Like someone had been running alongside me in the dark, right next to the trees, and decided that was the perfect moment to let loose. It wasn't a woman's scream or a man's scream. It was both. It was neither. It was raw, ugly pain. The kind that makes your hands jerk the wheel before your brain catches up. I swerved slightly but didn't stop. Just floored it. I don't know why. It was instinct. Maybe something buried in our DNA from before we had roofs and electric lights. But here's the part that made my gut turn cold. I checked the speedometer. It hadn't moved. I was pressing the gas down to the floor, but I was going 43 mph, exactly, like something had locked it in place. I tried braking, nothing. I lifted my foot and even tried shifting into neutral. The truck stayed at 43. I turned the wheel. Didn't matter. The road curved when it wanted to. I wasn't in control anymore. I might have been touching the wheel, but I wasn't driving. The scream came again, louder. This time it felt like it came from above me, like something was perched on the roof of the cab and dragging its nails across the metal. I opened the window. I don't know what I expected, maybe a bird, maybe some animal, but there was nothing except for the trees. They weren't trees anymore. They were people, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, but not alive, not really. Each shape stood still, unmoving, like mannequins carved from wood and shadow. Some tall, some small, some with hair, some with nothing, but smooth, stretched skin. Their arms were long, too long, and they didn't blink, didn't breathe. They lined the road like a procession. Just watching, I blinked, and they were trees again. But the feeling stuck with me. That feeling of being watched, judged. The scream didn't come a third time. Something worse did. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw myself, me sitting in the back seat, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. One hand raised and slapping the back window like I was trying to get my own attention. Blood smeared across the glass in the shape of fingers, some broken and bent backwards. And the worst part, the version of me back there had no eyes. Just dark, dripping holes like something had scooped them out. I slammed the brakes again. Nothing. I yanked the wheel. Still 43 mph. Then I saw the possum again, then the billboard, then the scream. This loop happened 7 more times. I counted. I even wrote hash marks on the back of an old envelope I found in the passenger seat. Each time, the billboard degraded a little more. The woman's face on the ad peeled back until it revealed a skull beneath. The man started smiling too wide. The possum stayed the same, but its tail moved the 6th time. Twitched. The 7th time, it was gone, not flattened. Not rotting. Gone. Like it had stood up and walked off the road. I thought about opening the door and jumping out. But something inside me, some buried instinct, again told me that if I left the truck, I wouldn't die. I'd just stop existing. Like the road would forget I'd ever been there. I tried calling for help. The phone wouldn't unlock. The screen glitched and flickered, then shut off. I pulled the battery out, waited, put it back in. Same thing, nothing worked. Not even the horn. My water bottle was empty. My stomach hurt. Time stopped meaning anything. Envelope had 34 hash marks on it before I finally stopped counting. I gave up trying to stay awake. The road didn't change whether I was alert or not. When I opened my eyes, It was the same .possum .billboard .scream but something shifted on the 40-second loop. The scream didn't come from outside. It came from the glove box. I reached over and popped it open. Inside was a small, black cassette tape, no label. Just a sticker with 3 numbers scribbled in faded marker. 098. I stared at it for a long time. Before I put it into the deck, the radio clicked to life. Not music. Not a voice. It was me. Begging. Sobbing. Saying, "Please get off the road. You have to get off the road. You have to crash. That's the only way. You have to crash." Then it cut off. I looked at the wheel, looked at the trees, then I grabbed the belt and yanked it loose. Climbed halfway out the window and braced my body. Then I grabbed the wheel and wrenched it. To the left. The truck responded. For the first time since I got on State Road 98, the truck moved the way I wanted it to. And I drove straight into the woods. The crash was thunder, metal bending, glass everywhere. I blacked out. When I woke up, it was morning. There were birds again. Real ones. The air smelled like pine. A man in a sheriff's uniform was shaking me gently. His cruiser was parked nearby. He looked confused. "Buddy," he said, "you all right? What the hell were you doing out here? There ain't no road anywhere near." "Here." I looked past him. No asphalt. No yellow lines, just dirt and woods. State Road 98. I mumbled. He frowned. "There ain't no State Road 98, he said. "Not in this county. Not in any county near here." He helped me up. My truck was totaled, half wrapped around a tree. But I was alive. When I got home, I checked every map I could find. No sign of 98. I called the Department of Transportation. Nothing. I called the locals. Nobody had heard of it, but I know what I saw. I still have the envelope. 42 hash marks. One faded bloodstain where my hand gripped it too tight. And sometimes, when the night's real quiet, I hear the tape playing again. You have to crash. You have to crash. Over and over again, because State Road 98 never ends unless you do. It was just after midnight when Wes hit the long stretch of Route 190 heading west out of Temple, Texas. His dashboard clock had just ticked over to 12:04 a.m., and the radio had gone dead around Little River Academy. Not static, not silence, just dead. Wes noticed that right away because he always kept it low, just enough to catch a hum of country or late-night talk. Tonight, it went flat like someone yanked the power cord out of the world. His phone, plugged into the USB port, refused to connect to. Not charging. No signal. Just a glowing black screen that looked like it was staring back at him. He'd left his shift late from the call center in Killeen. The new boss, some former Army guy who thought 10-hour shifts made men tougher, had held him back for some made-up protocol training. Wes hadn't complained, he needed the hours. But the drive back to the tiny town of Milano was always long and empty. Just 2-lane blacktop, dusted over road signs, and fields that looked like they hadn't grown anything in 20 years. The moon hung low, bloated and red, and the humid July air smeared the windshield no matter how often the wipers passed. He hadn't seen another car for maybe 30 miles. That should have been a blessing, but tonight it felt like the world had emptied itself out ahead of him, like the road was unspooling into some dead zone only he was dumb enough to drive into. The yellow lines blinked under his headlights in rhythm with his thoughts, keeping him just barely alert as fatigue sank into his spine. Then the red and blue lights flared behind him. Wes cursed under his breath and checked. The speedometer 62. In a 65, his registration was current. No taillight out, no rolling stop. Still, the light stayed steady, and there was no mistaking the sharp bark of the siren that came a second later. It wasn't a modern siren either. It had a deeper pitch, warbling and metallic, like something from an old movie. Something old. He pulled over just past a broken-down fence post, wheels crunching gravel. Behind him, the cruiser coasted to a stop, its headlights off. Only the dome light pulsed now, red, then blue, then red again, painting the nearby mesquite trees like they were dripping with blood and shadow. Wes waited, fingers tapping the steering wheel, watching the side mirror. The door never opened. Nobody got out for a full 30 seconds. Then the driver's door creaked open slowly, too slowly, and a figure stepped out. Wes squinted. The man was tall, lean, and wore the unmistakable tan uniform of a Texas Highway Patrol officer. Big, wide-brimmed hat. Straight-legged stance. A flashlight hung from one hand, but it wasn't on. The other hand rested on his belt near his holster. The figure walked like his boots were too heavy or the air was pushing back against him. There was something stiff about it, too, like the movement of someone trained to march rather than walk. Wes rolled down his window halfway and leaned out. Slightly. "Evening, officer. Is there a problem?" he asked, trying to keep the tremble out of his voice. The cop stopped at the rear fender and didn't answer. The radio silence hung heavy. The sound of cicadas had died too. Wes realized that all he could hear was the distant crackle of his own cooling engine. The flashlight clicked on then, blinding him in the mirror for a moment before swinging wide and off. The officer moved again, this time quicker, and appeared at the window. Wes recoiled slightly. The man's face was lined, pale, like someone who hadn't seen sunlight in years. His badge, glinting under the moonlight, was tarnished and worn. Not just scratched, but oxidized, dark in spots like it had been buried and dug back up. The nameplate read S. Hadley. Wes cleared his throat. I wasn't speeding, sir. Just heading home. Is something wrong?" The officer said nothing, just stared. His eyes were deep, too deep, and shimmered in a way no human eyes should, like charcoal embers under ash. They didn't blink. Wes noticed something else. The smell. It wasn't strong, but it crept in slow. A mix of gunpowder, mildew, and something sour underneath, like old blood on cloth. The officer finally spoke. License and registration. The voice was wrong. Not crackling or hoarse, but empty. It sounded like a recording being played. Back inside a hollow space. Wes nodded fast and reached for the glove compartment. His fingers shook slightly as he retrieved the documents and handed them out the window. The officer didn't take them, just looked at them like they were foreign objects. Then he spoke again. "You know what you did?" Wes frowned. "No, sir. I really don't. You ran the median. That made no sense." "What? I haven't. I mean, I've been on the shoulder just now, sure, but back in '54, the officer said. Red Buick, 4-door, smashed the post clean. You remember." Wes felt a chill trickle down his back. I wasn't even alive in '54. The officer leaned in closer. Wes caught a glimpse of something, his neck, or what should have been his neck. It wasn't skin anymore. It was cracked, crumbling black like old wood left in fire. The veins pulsed like burnt wires. "I remember." The cop whispered. Then he turned and walked back toward the cruiser. Wes sat frozen. His license and registration were still in his lap. He hadn't handed them over. He looked down to confirm, and they were gone. He looked up again. The patrol car was gone too. No lights. No engine sound. Just the empty road behind him stretching off into the black. He stepped out of the car in a daze, looking around. No tire marks, no police car, no officer. Just his car idling in the dark and the faint smell of char and sulfur hanging in the air. He drove home fast after that. The rest of the road was empty. Not a single car passed him, not even the distant glow of taillights. When he finally rolled Into his gravel driveway, he sat in the car for a long time, engine still running, staring out into the open field that bordered his house. The grass didn't move. The sky didn't blink. He didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Wes went online. He searched for any information he could find on the name S. Hadley, Texas Highway Patrol, Route 190. Anything from 1954. It took a few tries, but then he found it. Trooper Samuel Hadley, killed in the line of duty August 13, 1954. He'd been pulling over a stolen vehicle when he was struck by a third car that crossed the median. The impact killed him instantly. The driver fled. They never caught him. Locals said the stretch where it happened had been cursed ever since. People would report seeing strange lights. Some claimed a trooper would pull them over and then vanish. Wes clicked off the screen. He never took Route 190 again, but sometimes, when he couldn't sleep, he'd hear a siren. Not the new kind, but the old, echoing wail that rose up from nowhere and faded before you could be sure you'd heard it. And sometimes, he'd dream about burning eyes behind a badge from a year that kept coming back. There was something about the way the light hit his windshield at dawn that made Walter Deacon notice things most people wouldn't. He was the kind of man who saw smudges others didn't, heard engine ticks others tuned out, and worried about things like brake fluid viscosity and air filter fibers. He kept his '95 Dodge Ram in the kind of pristine condition that made strangers assume he was still making payments on it. But the morning of February 19th, right before sunrise over the flat nothing between Cutler and Dimebox, Texas, he saw something that stopped him cold, something he couldn't clean off. It started as condensation. That's what he told himself at first. Overnight fog or breath from the cold snap, but it was just on the inside. Just a cluster of handprints, small ones right near the bottom corner of the passenger side windshield. Not pressed flat like someone steadying themselves. No, these were smeared upward. 5 fingers each, uneven, like they were clawing toward the dashboard. And most disturbing of all, they were tinted red, faintly. Not bright like fresh blood, but dried, oxidized, rusty. Like someone had dipped a child's hand in old paint and dragged it up the glass. He stared at them through the glass for a long minute, key halfway turned in the ignition. There hadn't been anyone in his truck last night. Not since he left the refinery at 10 and drove straight home, stopping only to grab a Dr. Pepper at the hop-in on Route 77. He always locked the doors, always. Didn't even let the neighborhood kids hop in the bed during July parades. He climbed in slow, glancing around the cabin. Empty. No signs of entry. No glass broken. Nothing moved. And the handprints were dry. Like they'd been there for days, maybe weeks, just hidden until the right light hit them. Walter didn't drive to work that day. He called in, which in itself was strange. He'd gone in with bronchitis, a cracked rib, even a busted knuckle dripping blood onto the control panel. But something about those prints made his stomach do flips, like he'd downed sour milk. He scrubbed them. Windex, ammonia, even some baking soda paste his sister swore took out bird poop. They faded a little, then reappeared the next morning. Same place. Same size, but this time there were more. 3 on the driver's side, now fainter, like something or someone had pressed against the glass while watching him sleep from the inside. Walter set up his phone on video mode that night, pointing toward the windshield, left it running. While he slept in the truck. Cold as hell, but he figured if someone was messing with him, he'd catch it. Nothing happened. No knocks, no bumps, no movement on the footage. But come sunrise, the handprints were back, not fresh. Older, drier. Almost brittle in appearance, like they'd been fossilized into the glass. He showed his buddy Nate. Kids, Nate shrugged, taking a puff of his Marlboro. Maybe snuck in while you were sleeping, left the prints, and got out without you. Hearing. Walter shook his head. From the inside, Nate. Inside. Condensation makes it look reversed sometimes. Then why are they blood-colored? Nate didn't answer that dot by the third day. Walter noticed something else. The prints were changing position, slightly. At first, just an inch higher. Then the next morning, clustered near the mirror. Then another time, trailing toward the steering wheel. Still no signs of a break-in. Still locked. Still sealed dot. He started hearing things. First, it was a soft tapping, like fingernails on vinyl, only while he was parked. Only when the heater was off and the engine quiet. Then came the whispers. Not words, exactly. Just something under breath. Like someone sitting right behind him, murmuring in discomfort. He turned fast once, sure he'd caught something moving in the rearview mirror, a flash of pale skin, maybe. But the cab was empty. One night he parked at a rest stop near Lake Somerville, hoping to just sleep it off. He hadn't been sleeping well at home anyway. Every creak or tree branch against the house had started sounding like nails on glass. He figured the open air would help. But around 2 in the morning, his truck got cold. Not winter cold, but meat locker, frozen bone cold. He woke up to his breath fogging out in thick clouds and every window on the inside slick with condensation. And on every pane, windshield, side mirrors, rear window were dozens of handprints. All small, all red. Some overlapping, some trailing off toward the floor. He turned on the lights, shivering, but couldn't see anything in the cab. Just the prints. He threw open the door and stumbled out into the dark, gravel crunching under his boots. The air outside was warm, damp, spring-like, but inside his truck, it was ice. And when he looked back in, he swore he saw a face in the fogged-up glass. A child's face. Hollow eyes. Lips sewn shut with red thread. He didn't go back in that night. Walter drove straight to the church in Lyons the next morning. He wasn't a religious man, hadn't been since his father's funeral back in '98. But he was out of ideas. Father Rodrigo listened politely as Walter told him about the handprints, the face, the way it always happened in the truck. The priest asked questions about his family, his past. Had he hurt a child? Had he ever been near an accident? That's when Walter remembered, years ago. 2007, a hot August afternoon. He'd been driving back from a bar in Giddings. Buzzed, not drunk, but enough to be slow on the brakes. There was a boy, maybe 6 or 7. A ball rolled into the road near Old Mill Creek. The boy chased it. Walter swerved, but not fast enough. The hit was soft. The sound wasn't. It was a dull thunk that still echoed in his ears when he laid awake. But when he got out, nothing. No body, no blood. Just the ball, dented in the ditch. He'd waited, looked, called out. But no one came. No police report was ever filed. No missing child alerts. He'd convinced himself it hadn't happened. That he'd imagined it. That it was the buzz or a raccoon. But he never drove that stretch again. Not until recently when the refinery rerouted his commute. The priest paled. Said maybe the spirit was bound, that Walter needed to confess. To do penance, but Walter just wanted it gone. Make it stop, he said. Bless the truck. Sprinkle holy water. Whatever it takes. Father Rodrigo hesitated but agreed. They went out together. The sun was already dipping behind the trees. The wind picked up as they approached the truck. The cab looked normal until they got close. The windows were fogged again, from the inside, and the handprints, they weren't red anymore. They were black, like ash. And they were everywhere. Not just on the glass, but streaking down the paint, clinging to the tires, Pressed against the headrests, Rodrigo began the blessing, voice firm at first. Then trembling. Walter stood beside him until the smell hit like burnt hair and sulfur, and the truck began to creak, not from wind, but from inside, like something moving in the seat cushions, in the vents. Then the engine coughed. Ignition clicked, though no key was in it, and the truck roared to life. The lights came on. High beams, and behind the glass, just for a second, Walter saw a pair of eyes watching him. Small, black, crying. Then the windshield cracked. From the inside, a single jagged line running from top to bottom. A shriek followed, thin and sharp like a tea kettle, but it came from inside the truck. Rodrigo dropped his holy water. Backed away. Walter hasn't driven since. The Dodge still sits outside. His house, tires deflated, battery long dead. But every morning, without fail, the handprints are there. A little higher, a little darker. Moving inch by inch across the windshield. Last night, they reached the driver's seat, and this morning, Walter didn't answer his door, didn't answer his phone, but the truck is gone. And down by the old mill road, near the bend where kids say you can still hear screams under the rustle of trees, there's a new smear on the guardrail. A red one, small, like fingers dragged across it on their way out. It was a stretch of back road no one ever used unless they had a reason. FM 1875 between Devlin and Craymore was the kind of highway that curled through ranchland like an old scar, sunken at the shoulders and lined with brittle grass and crushed. Soda cans from the 90s. There were no lights, no gas stations, just fields and wind and the kind of silence that wrapped around your ribs too tightly the longer you sat in it. Darren had taken it that night because the main route was closed, due to a cattle trailer jackknife. The detour sign looked like it had been pulled out of a storage shed coated in dust, leaning at an angle that suggested it might collapse before sunrise. But he followed it anyway. He was driving a 10-year-old Dodge Dakota with a squeaky belt and a fresh set of tires he'd been meaning to rotate. The truck belonged to his dad, who'd passed the previous winter, and every time Darren got behind the wheel, the scent of old cologne and pipe smoke still lingered in the fabric of the Pia. Seats. The trip back to Devlin had been uneventful until he felt the back passenger side lurch and wobble like he'd just run over something sharp. He pulled over onto the gravel shoulder, engine still running, hazard lights flickering like nervous twitches in the dark. He stepped out into the Texas night, where the cicadas should have been screaming but weren't. The air smelled of heat and dust, and as he crouched by the back tire, he felt it a soft hiss, not a blowout. A slow leak. Maybe a nail or a jagged stone. Nothing he couldn't handle. He popped open the bed toolbox and pulled out the jack and iron. The gravel beneath his boots shifted in soft crunches, some of it still radiating heat from the day. But something else shifted too. Something beneath the top layer. He paused. The tire iron halfway to the lug nuts and cocked his head. At first, he thought it was the wind. A soft sifting sound. Then it grew clearer. A voice. Low, just barely above the static of insects returning to life in the distance. Whispered, strained, like someone talking through a mouthful of dry soil. Hey. He stood up, scanned the road. Nothing. Just barbed wire fences and empty pastures. The whisper had come from his left, from the gravel. He took a slow step back and crouched again, pretending to focus on the tire. Listening. Helped. He froze. This time, there was no mistaking it. The voice had risen just slightly, no louder then. A breath, but clear as day. And it hadn't come from the woods or the fence line. It had come from under the gravel. His skin went cold. He dropped the tire iron and stepped back, staring at the rocks like they might move again. His pulse thudded so hard he could feel it in his ears. The air suddenly felt thicker, heavier. He knelt slowly and pressed his hand to the ground. Nothing. Then dash heat. Not from the sun or the engine. It was pulsing warmth. A live warmth, like the ground was breathing beneath him. Can't get out? He shot back to his feet. The voice had grown raspier, more desperate, like dry leaves scraping together. He? Back toward the driver's side door, debating whether to leave the flat as it was and just drive until the rim cracked in half. But when he reached for the handle, the whisper changed. Darren. His breath caught. He hadn't told anyone where he was going. Hadn't even texted Ash back before he left. There was no one within 30 miles who should have known his name. Darren. Don't leave me. The voice sounded female now. Familiar. Faintly. It was hard to tell through the gravel rasp. He took one cautious step forward and glanced down. The shoulder looked the same, just rocks and dirt, a few cigarette butts and tire dust. But then a stone near his boot twitched out just once, then another shifted. Then the whole stretch began to ripple. Not like an earthquake. Like something underneath was pushing upward. He stumbled back, nearly falling into the ditch, and watched as a hand broke the surface. It was thin, coated in dust and pebbles, nails chipped and dirty, skin torn and scabbed. It clawed at the air. Once, then fell limp. Another whisper came, gurgled this time. Too late. Then another hand pushed through farther down the shoulder. Then another. 3 in total. All clawing, scrabbling. The rocks spilled off their knuckles like water, and Darren saw fingers twitching, one of them curling like it was beckoning him forward. The whispers rose together. Not just one voice anymore. 3, 4, maybe more. All from the gravel. Join. US. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't screamed. It was said gently, softly, as if welcoming a friend to sit and stay a while. He turned and ran. Left everything, the tire iron, the jack, the half-loosened lug nuts. He jumped into the truck, twisted. The key so hard he nearly snapped it. The engine roared back to life. He slammed it into drive and peeled off. The rim grinding and shrieking against the pavement. Sparks flashing behind him. As the truck sped down FM 1875, he looked in the rearview. The gravel shoulder looked calm again, normal. But he swore he could still hear the whispers, even with the windows rolled up and the radio blasting. Back in town, he replaced the rim, told no one what he'd seen. How could he? They'd think he was sleep-deprived, cracked, or drunk. Maybe he was. But that night when he laid down in bed, he felt something hard under his pillow. He reached beneath and pulled out a single jagged stone coated in dirt, still warm. And from somewhere deep in the walls, or maybe under the floorboards, he heard a whisper. You stopped. That's all we need. After that, he never drove at night again. Didn't matter where he was going. Didn't matter how urgent. He knew the gravel would be waiting, and it didn't like being ignored. It started on Farm to Market Road 1749, the stretch between Coleman and Trickham where the hills rise like the backs of sleeping dogs, and the cedar. Scrub creeps too close to the road. I was coming back from a job in Abilene hauling fencing tools, and a busted auger in the back of the truck, dust coating everything inside and out. It was just after sundown, that in-between time when the shadows lengthen and everything looks stranger than it ought to. You know the time I'm talking about. The golden turns gray, and even the deer start acting like they forgot the rules of the living world. I just passed a bend near an old dry creek bed, a place the locals call Wash Hollow, though there's rarely ever water in it, when I saw movement on the right side of the road. I thought it might be a coyote at first, but then I saw her. A girl, maybe 17 or 18, running beside my truck. Not on the shoulder, not trying to flag me down. She was keeping pace. Long dark hair whipping behind her, pale skin catching the last of the sun, eyes locked straight ahead. She didn't wave. She didn't scream. She didn't even look at me. I slowed down, instinct more than decision. Something about her didn't sit right. She wasn't out of breath, didn't stumble on the gravel or twist an ankle in the thick weeds, just ran, steady and silent, like she'd been doing it forever. I watched her for maybe 10 seconds, and that was all it took to set my nerves twitching. I pressed the brake, not hard. The second I did, she turned her head, not all the way, just a flick like she knew I'd hesitate. Her mouth curved in a way that was almost a smile but felt like a dare. I kept slowing down anyway, drawn to something I couldn't name, and then she veered off into the trees. I should have kept driving. I know that now, but I pulled over, rolled down the window, and called out to her. No answer. Just the rustle of mesquite branches and the sound of my own engine ticking as it cooled. I sat there, hand frozen on the gear shift, staring into that thicket like she'd pop back out, laughing, maybe saying she needed help. But she IDN single quotes T. I got out. You ever walk into the woods knowing you're doing something dumb but doing it anyway? That was me, boots crunching through dead leaves, heart pounding so loud it felt like a warning in Morse code. I called again, nothing. I went 20 feet in, then 30. Still no sign of her, not even a broken twig or a footprint. The trees swallowed everything. When I got back to the truck, my front left tire was flat. Not slow going or hissing, just dead flat. I hadn't heard a pop, hadn't hit a pothole. It was like it deflated on command. I cursed and went to the back for the jack, tossing aside chains and rusty tools, already picturing the long dark ride I'd have if I didn't fix it quick. That's when I saw the handprint on the tailgate. Small, delicate, smudged in what I hoped was dirt that I didn't sleep that night. Patched the tire and drove straight to Coleman, every now and then checking the mirrors like she might be back. But she wasn't, not that night. The second time it happened was 2 weeks later, near the same stretch of road but closer to Trickham. This time, I'd gone out late to meet a guy selling an old generator, ended up staying longer than I should have. It was past 10, the moon high and full, lighting up the road like silver dust. I wasn't thinking about her. I'd convinced myself it had been heat stroke or some trick of the twilight. But as I rounded a bend near the cattle gate where the asphalt thins into cracked gravel, I saw her again. Same girl, same pace. Running. Beside me like she belonged there. I hit the gas. I don't know what I expected. Maybe that she'd vanish, dissolve into mist or dust like in the stories. But she didn't. She sped up with me. Not running harder, just moving faster, like physics didn't apply to her. I was doing 60, then 70. She never looked my way, never broke stride. And then she was gone. No transition, no puff of smoke. Just there one moment and then not. I kept driving. Didn't stop till I was in the lot of a Whataburger near Brownwood, breathing like I'd run the whole damn distance myself. I walked around the truck just to prove to myself everything was fine. No flat tire, no handprint, no blood. But when I opened the glove box to get my registration for no reason at all, just busy work, I found something folded between the manuals and a half-dead flashlight. A photograph, black and white, faded, looked old, maybe from the 70s or earlier. A group of girls standing in a field. 4 of them. One of them looked like her. Same eyes, same hair. Except this girl was smiling wide, sun in her face, alive in a way the runner had never been. On the back, scrawled in pencil, June, Trickham Track Meet, 1973, God help us. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe it? I didn't even know where to start. I burned the picture in a fire pit behind my shop that night. Watched it curl and blacken, hoping maybe that would end it. Hoping that if it was some kind of ghost, some lost echo, it'd move on once the last thing tying it here was gone. But I saw her again last week. Not out on the road in town downtown Coleman, walking past the feed store. She wasn't running. This time, just strolling like any other teenage girl, except the people she passed didn't flinch, didn't look. Like she wasn't there, but I saw her. And she saw me. She stopped for a second, turned her head like she had that first night, and gave me that same almost smile. Then she walked into the alley between the hardware store and the post office and never came out the other side. I ran. In after her. Found nothing. Just the scent of cedar and the faint echo of bare feet slapping against pavement. Now she shows up wherever I drive. Doesn't matter the road or time of day. I'll be on Loop 322 or I-20, sometimes even as far as Waco, and there she is, keeping pace, watching the horizon, daring me to stop, daring me to look away. Sometimes she taps the window. Sometimes I see her in the rear view, sitting in the bed of the truck, hair lifted by a wind I can't feel, and I've figured something out. She's not looking for help. She never was. She's waiting for me to pull over, to stop the truck and step out. And when I do, because I know I will, someday, because men are stupid and curious and prideful, I don't think I'll get back in Dodge. So if you're ever out driving past sunset and you catch a glimpse of a girl running alongside you, don't slow down. Don't look. Don't call out. She's not lost. She's hunting. The first time I saw the flickering sign for the Trail's Edge Motel was on a back route off Route 183, somewhere between Lampasas and Brownwood, where the scrublands roll into hills and the map gets fuzzy around the edges. I'd been driving since early afternoon, trying to make it to Abilene by nightfall, but the heat had warped the horizon, the gas stations had thinned out, and the coffee from the last roadside diner was punching holes in my gut. I wasn't looking for anything fancy, just a bed, a bathroom, and a ceiling that didn't leak. What I found was that damn sign humming and blinking in the dusk like a dying firefly, vacancy. Then, right beneath it, half lit in green, room. 0 available. I didn't think much of it. Road motels are weird by design, relics from the 60s clinging to existence through a mix of cigarette burns, ghost stories, and boiled eggs in lobby refrigerators. The office was a squat little cube with a dusty sliding window, dead flies caught in the track. A bell sat on the counter but didn't ding when I tapped it. I was about to knock when the curtain behind the window twitched and a thin man with sunken eyes stepped into view. He looked like someone who hadn't blinked in days. His name tag said Mel, and it sat crooked on a pale green uniform shirt with an old stain over the breast pocket. "You got a room?" I asked, jerking my thumb toward the flickering sign. His lips twitched but didn't smile. "Just the one? Fine, what's the rate?" He slid over an old ledger book with my key resting on top, an actual metal key, not a card. The tag on it was cracked plastic, black numbers stamped on white 0. "Room 0? I asked, already feeling the first tug of unease. "Just what's left," he said, as if that explained anything. "Cash only. No guests, no refunds." I handed over $40 and signed the line beneath someone whose name looked like it had been scribbled out twice. The key was cold when I picked it up, and the tag bent backward like it had been dipped in heat and frozen mid-curl. Mel didn't offer directions, but I spotted the room tucked away at the far end of the U-shaped layout, past the soda machine that wheezed warm air, past rooms with curtains drawn tight like they were bracing against some invisible pressure. Room 0 was set apart from the rest, sitting in its own shadow, the light above the door flickering just out of sync with the one over the office. I unlocked the door. It opened easier than it should have, swinging wide on silent hinges that looked like they hadn't moved in years. The room was cold, unnaturally so. I stepped in, thinking maybe the AC had been left on full blast, but there was no hum, no movement of air. Just stillness, like the room had been sealed in a jar. The decor was outdated, but not in a charming way. Everything was faded, wrong-toned. The floral bedspread was stained with patterns that didn't quite look like flowers up close. The TV was one of those boxy zeniths from another century, and when I turned it on, it only played static, except the static wasn't random. It pulsed, almost in time with the flicker of the outside sign. On, off, white noise, silence, like a slow, wet breath on the back of your neck. I closed the curtains tight and dropped my duffel by the side of the bed. The bathroom light worked, sort of casting a pale green glow over the cracked tiles and rust-ringed sink. When I looked in the mirror, I noticed something that stopped me cold. There was moisture on the glass. A smear, like a handprint sliding down. But I hadn't taken a shower. I hadn't even washed my hands yet. My reflection looked off, like the lighting didn't quite match the rest of the room. I blinked, rubbed at the glass. The handprint stayed. That's when I heard the flickering again. Not just outside the door now. It was in the wall, in the ceiling, behind the mirror. It didn't sound electrical. It was softer, like the wet flap of something crawling just under. The wallpaper. I should have left. I know that now. But road exhaustion has a way of convincing you to ignore the weird in favor of the simple. I just wanted sleep. I lay on the bed and clicked off the lamp, and in the dark, the red neon from the vacancy sign spilled through the cracks in the curtains, like blood seeping under a door. I don't know how long I slept, or if I even did. What I remember next is waking up to the sound of someone whispering, not outside, inside. It came from under the bed, then from the bathroom, then worse from the TV, which had somehow turned itself on again and was playing that same static, only now it wasn't. Random. There were shapes in it. Faces flickering, mouths opening and closing, whispering things I couldn't quite catch. The screen pulsed, and with each flicker, the room seemed to shift ever so slightly, like it was breathing. I grabbed the remote, but the TV wouldn't turn off. The buttons didn't work. I unplugged it, and the screen stayed on, bright, then dim. Then the word "stay" flickered onto the screen in static letters. Then it blinked out. I got up, tried the door. Locked. The knob turned but didn't open. I checked the windows painted shut. I started yelling, pounding, kicking the wall. No one came. No footsteps, no motel neighbors shouting back to shut up. Just silence. And then the lights cut out pitch black. For a few seconds, I didn't breathe. Then the light above the door flicked on again outside, and red neon poured through the curtains. In it, I could see the outlines of things on the walls drawings. No, carvings. Hundreds of tiny scratched-in marks, like fingernails dragged across every surface. I looked closer and saw they weren't just scratches. They were names, dozens of them, hundreds, some in English, some in something else. And right at eye level near the headboard, mine was already there, scrawled neatly, like it had always. "Ben!" I screamed. I couldn't help it. The bed shook beneath me like something was crawling inside it, not inside. I threw the covers back. The mattress pulsed, bloated like it had lungs. I ran to the bathroom and flicked the light on. It didn't come on, but the mirror lit up anyway. Not with my reflection. There was a man in the mirror. Not Mel, someone else. Wearing my clothes, smiling. Behind him, the room was clean, normal, lit up like the vacancy sign. He lifted a hand and wiped the fog from the mirror. My breath caught because I hadn't exhaled. I stepped back. The man in the mirror didn't. He just leaned in, smiled wider, and whispered, "You're already here." I lost it. I charged the door and pounded until my fists bled. Then suddenly it opened. Just like that. I tumbled out into the gravel lot, gasping. The night was still, no sound, no wind. I turned around and the motel was different. All the lights were off. The sign was dark. The office boarded up. The rooms looked abandoned, overgrown. Vines crept across the doors like veins. No footprints in the gravel. My car was gone. I staggered to where the office had been. The window was shattered and the inside was coated in dust. Cobwebs stretched across the counter. The ledger book was still there, though. I flipped through the pages. My name was there. Sure enough, right under someone named E. Dalton, but the date beside mine wasn't today. It wasn't even this year. It said 1998. That was 27 years ago. I looked at my hands. They didn't feel like mine. I didn't feel like mine. The vacancy sign behind me blinked once. Then again, then the door to room 0 creaked open, slow and silent, as if inviting me back inside. And I swear, just before I turned and ran into the dark Texas scrubland, I saw the curtain twitch and someone wearing my face peek out, smiling. Waiting, like he'd just gotten comfortable, and maybe he had. Because someone always does. That's what room 0 is for. Highway 59 ran straight through East Texas like a split vein, long and hot and pulsing with diesel breath and ghost heat off the blacktop. Locals called it the Devil's Tongue, and they weren't just being colorful. It stretched from Texarkana down toward Houston, and somewhere between Lufkin and Livingston, there was a stretch no more than 6 miles where things stopped making sense. They didn't mark it on the map, but everyone who drove long enough eventually felt it. Like an invisible stitch in the world. It was the stretch where radios gave nothing but static. GPS signals scrambled into ancient coordinates and road signs. Flickered when you weren't looking. It always looked empty. Always smelled wrong. And every year, right around late summer, another 18-wheeler went missing there. Not crashed. Not abandoned. Just gone like the road opened up and swallowed it whole. Nobody really talked about it directly. Drivers whispered over greasy Waffle House counters and truck stop coffee about rigs that vanished off dispatch logs, or that one cousin who drove for Ortega, Produce, and was never seen again after hauling through Polk County. But what folks really didn't like talking about were the ones who came back. Because sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the driver wasn't gone forever. Sometimes he, or what looked like him, came walking out of the piney woods weeks later, barefoot and smiling. The first one I saw was Curtis Bell. This was back in '03. When I was still working dispatch down in Nacogdoches, Curtis was hauling a load of cattle feed through the night, and his last call came at 3:44 a.m., right when he was supposed to be crossing that haunted sliver. "Fog real thick out here," he'd said. "Trucks acting funny. Feels like the road's slick. But the weather's dry. You copy?" We never heard from him again. 2 weeks later, a hiker found Curtis standing at the edge of a fire trail 30 miles off the highway, holding his shoes like a little boy after church. He was caked in mud, hair full of pine needles, eyes glassy, and too bright. The thing was, he didn't seem scared or relieved, just calm. Like he'd taken a walk and forgot to check the time. We asked him what happened, but all he said was, "I saw the old road. It's underneath the new one." Then he started sleeping on the roof of his house. Wouldn't come down unless it rained. His wife left him. He was found dead the following spring, sitting upright in the middle of his kitchen with every cabinet open and filled with Black River stones. Nobody knew where the stones came from. After that, I started keeping a notebook. You work dispatch long enough, you learn to listen between the lines. Over the next decade, I collected stories quiet. Hushed ones about Highway 59 and what it did to the drivers who braved it at night. I kept it quiet, of course. No one wants to read horror stories in their logistics reports. Then came the job with Rattlebone Freight. And with it, My chance to see for myself. It was 2017. I'd been promoted to field supervisor, riding shotgun, with new hires to evaluate routes. That September, I rode with a fresh out of training kid named Luis Mendonza. He was cocky, played Tejano too loud, and had a picture of his baby girl taped to the dash. The route looked simple. Tyler to Houston, with a straight shot down 59. I didn't tell him about the stretch. Around 2 a.m., somewhere past Dibble, the road started to feel wrong. There was a weight in the air, like before a thunderclap, and the sky, despite being starless, glowed a color that wasn't black or gray or anything I could name. Luis turned down the music himself, which told me he felt it too. The headlights seemed to fade before they reached the road. Our shadow wasn't where it should have been. Then the truck shuddered. It wasn't mechanical. It felt like the whole rig had hit a seam in reality, like one wheel was driving on pavement and the other on something that wanted to remember being dirt. Luis tightened his grip. "You feel that?" I said nothing. A minute later, we saw lights up ahead, tail lights. A rig, older model, mid-90s Peterbilt, hauling something under a black tarp. It wasn't moving. Just parked dead center, no hazards, no flares. We passed it slowly, and as we did, I glanced into the cab. There was a man in the driver's seat, face pressed against the glass, smiling. He had no eyes. Luis swore and slammed the gas. We shot forward, the tires screaming like something underneath us wanted to hold on. For a moment, I swear the world flickered. The trees vanished and were replaced by something taller, thinner, twisted. Not alive, not dead, just old. Then we were out. The road turned smooth again, and a green sign told us Houston was 142 miles ahead. Luis didn't speak until sunrise. When he did, all he said was, "That truck didn't have plates." I filed a report that got lost. That night, Luis quit. Left the rig at a truck wash in Spring and walked home. Never took another route. What really broke me, though, was last summer. A driver named Brigham Big Rig Crowder disappeared around the same stretch. That name might not mean anything to you, but Brigham was a legend. 25 years hauling, never missed a check-in, never failed a logbook audit, one of the good ones. When he went missing, I knew it wasn't ordinary. They found his truck, nose down in a gully off the old service road. It wasn't wrecked, just parked there, like something told him to steer off the highway and wait. The engine was off. His boots were still on the pedals. But he was gone. 3 weeks later, he came back. I went to see him myself in a state facility outside Beaumont. He was different, clean, too clean. Skin stretched too tight over his face, no laugh lines, no scent. He just stared through the glass and said my name before I introduced myself. "Hey, Jimmy," he whispered. "You remember when we drove through San Augustine and saw that dog in the road with two shadows?" I finally figured it out. I asked him what happened on 59. He tilted his head and said, "Some roads forget where they end. And some trucks never really stop moving. You think the engine dies, but the wheels," he lifted one finger and made a slow spiral in the air, "they keep turning, just not here." I asked him if he wanted to leave. He leaned close and smiled. I never did come back. The next morning, the cell was empty. Door locked, no footage, just his boots. Still warm, I tried burning my notebook. Pages wouldn't catch dots, so now I'm here, riding alone, making my last haul. One final trip before retirement. Got my paperwork in, told the office I'd do one more run from Marshall to Sugar Land. I chose the route myself. I chose the time. Midnight. I've passed Dibble. The fog's rolling in. I saw a sign I've never seen before, plain steel, hammered into the grass. It said, "Old road, keep left." The cab's cold, and the radio is whispering names I haven't Said in years. One more thing. If someone tells you Highway 59 eats its own, don't laugh it off. Some of us get digested slowly, and some of us walk back out, still smiling.